I'll give that.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
You all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good, good. You've got some other different type of pictures tonight, Ian.
I'm trying to go through all my pictures each week.
Wow. So how have you done that? Hi,
Oh,
Janett.
right.
Hi.
Hi. Can't see you.
I'm coming.
Oh, my
I'm
video.
scaring the mess around me so that I don't, you don't see everything that's going on in the background.
Well, it usually,
Hi.
It usually takes a while for everybody to join in. I know you said you've only got an hour,
Fine.
but we'll try and get you in as quickly as possible. I'm just going to quickly introduce you to Ian and to Sam.
Hello, Ian and Sam.
Hello, dear.
Hello.
Because Janett's only going to be here for an hour or so. Me and Janett connected through Black Lives Matter, and Janett you started it, haven't you, in Cumbria?
Not quite. Literally, later this week will be the first meeting.
Fantastic. So it falls in line with what we're going to be talking about tonight, and just a little, it's very early, it's a new era, but I've lost.
Oh wow, brilliant.
So when you think, like, we did 3 events in Preston, so it's good that people are talking above. So that's the local paper, and
Front page as well.
but it's interesting because they don't tell you that your name's going to be in the paper.
Right.
And I don't know if that's one of your pictures.
Have you noticed they always put your age as well?
Yeah, why is that?
It's partly to do with the fact that they make sure they've got the right person, and it's supposed to show that they're taking an interest in you.
Wow. Yeah, because I always say it's not about me; it's about the people, and they always ask that question: Are you a Windrush generation? I say I'm a descendant.
Yes.
So it's interesting, that by doing that, it highlights all the other issues like the Windrush, because it's always in the story now. So,
which is good. It's what you want.
Yeah, very hot, isn't it?
Really hot. Really muggy.
Oh, Glenroy's here tonight. Oh, fabulous.
You are contacted by, well, they have become Windrush Legal Angels. And
say that again.
Can you hear me okay? Is my volume up all right?
Yeah, it's just, I think, I don't know if my volume is low as well, because I'm not hearing everybody.
Yeah, mine's not been good tonight. I don't know why it seems to have decided that volume is no longer an issue for it. But I was contacted by a lady called Sam, who's based in London, and she has just set up in the last 48 hours with the Windrush Legal Angels.
Wow.
And, yeah, they're putting together They've done lots of things. And
Oh, I'd love to connect with them, see what's happening.
I put you both in touch with each other. I did a shout out on Facebook for them today. Solicitors and legal sort of bodies, compensation claims and claims for making applications and stuff. So they're a bunch. So you need to hook up with them.
Hang on, I'm just seeing if there's some interference. So I'm just muting. If everybody can mute just for a moment. If you've got some interference where you are, wow, it's hot. If it's quiet, it's not too bad. But if you've got voices going on in your home or wherever you are, it just interferes if anybody's speaking. Welcome everybody, Glenroy, Michelle, C. Roth, Jen, Julia waved. Just making sure that, you know, when you get last minute messages, I can't get in and things like that. So bear with me. Oh, Emma's here tonight. And it's 8:33. In a couple of minutes, we will start introducing ourselves, because that bit of the meeting takes a long time, especially when you got 40 people. And we do really like to give everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves and just say hello. But I will ask everybody to keep it to 60 seconds as best as you can, because there's a lot of people. I hope you've all had a great week since last week. I'm roasting. Don't know about everybody. I'm hot. Is everybody hot? So we'll just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll start to introduce ourselves. Nice to see you, Emma.
Hiya, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Great.
It's like therapy, isn't it, every week now?
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Jen, I can't see you. Hi, Suli. Hi, Lana.
Hi, Glenda.
Welcome, welcome. You might have to, whoever that one is, you might have to move away from your PC or your phone. Gets interference.
Hi, Glenda. Can you hear me now?
Hi, Suli. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Glenda, can you hear me? Because we're in the same room, 2 meters apart. But if I put my thing on, it'll.
I can hear you, Lana. I can hear you.
That'll be fine. Honestly, my mute.
Brilliant. Yeah. So we won't have interference. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Just wondering where Anthony is. So we've got main speakers, except the other main host. So, just trying to cool down. Okay, while we're waiting for Anthony, if we can start by just introducing ourselves. I'm going to say, my name's Glenda Andrew. I'm the co-founder of Preston Windrush, as most of you are aware. We hold these the Windrush Conference FreeTalk every Tuesday evening. I think this is our 18th or 19th. It's been really informative, very successful, great feedback. And we also have on a Thursday now, a PR admin type of group that's coming together that is helping Preston Windrush, but other groups to sort of formalize and do things, helping other organizations. tonight we're talking about Windrush, Black Lives Matter, based on what we spoke about last week about identity, and it's had a lot of conversation in the last few days. So it's about hate crime, racism, understanding what is what, and also history, the history of how we got to where we are today. And that's why we've got Anthony Brown. I've got Janett Walker from the Lakes, the Lake District, who we've met through Black Lives Matter, and they're starting a Black Lives Matter in Cumbria. And we've also got Suli, who did a presentation about hate crime about 6 weeks ago, I think it was. And we always said that we would have her back on, and it all sort of links together. So that's who I am. I'm going to start from my left-hand corner, Ian Cash, who's here every week. Welcome again, Ian. If you could just, in 60 seconds, briefly introduce yourself and what you hope to get from this evening.
I can do that. My name's Ian Cash, part of the committee. I'm a photographer. All these issues are very important to me for lots of reasons, which I won't bore you with. And what I get from it is I love history, and we have sanitized history, and each week I learn something new. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, before I go, I might have to vanish because I'm picking my son up later.
Okay. I hope you come back when you vanish. Janett, would you like to introduce yourself? I'm going to ask everybody if they could speak up loud, because I don't know, the sound's a bit low tonight. Janett, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Janett Walker. As Glenda says, I live in Windermere in Cumbria, in the Lake District. And I think I'm going to be speaking for a little bit longer later on, so I won't go on too much. But as Glenda briefly said as well, our paths crossed over recent weeks, what's been happening with Black Lives Matter. And we had a lovely Zoom chat on Saturday afternoon while the storms raged around us. And Glenda invited me to chat to you guys about what's going on up here in the lakes, and what our plans are for the future, and how I came to find myself in this room tonight, in this Zoom room tonight, really. So I'll chat a bit more about that in a little while, and who I am and where I'm from.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we have the beautiful Julia? Oh, you're on mute, Julia.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. Julia Davidson, ex-councillor for the last 8 years for Peterborough City Council, Windrush activist, campaigner, and introduced to this group by my brother Sam. And I have to say, loving every minute of it. It's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. I'm not a big TV watcher, so it's very informative and it's thought-provoking, and it provides great interaction with different people.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julia. And right underneath you, we've got the lovely Lana Palmer Davis, I think it is. Welcome to the first Windrush FreeTalk Conference. Would you like to introduce yourself, Lana? You're on mute, sorry. You want to unmute yourself?
Right, I'm using Sueli's because Sueli and I are in the room together because I'm not allowed to use Zoom through work, unfortunately.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So my name is Lana Palmer Davies. I'm the Community Cohesion Sergeant at Preston. So my areas of responsibility is our South BCU. So that's Preston, Chorley, Leyland and Skem. So cover a wide area. My main responsibility is reviewing all hate crime that comes into South. And I have a team of PC Ash Gibson and 2 link workers. But part of my role is also about community engagement. So we do a lot of education. Ash goes out to schools, high schools, and talks about hate crime. We work closely with UCLan and other colleges and universities in trying to educate people around hate crime issues. So I'm very delighted to be here. I think it is a topic that we need to talk more openly about and be more honest about. And it's something dear to my heart, which I think probably stems from where I have come from as a person and where I've lived and what I've done in my life.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lana. Thank you. And I'm sure we're going to hear from you later on this evening. Emma, going across to my left. Good evening again, Emma.
Hiya, you all right?
Yes, I'm great.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm Emma Harris. I'm an immigration and nationality barrister based in London. Basically came on a few weeks ago to do one of these talks on Glenda's invitation, to give a bit of the legal background to what I worked out had happened to the Windrush. Obviously lots of different things had happened to lots of different people in different ways. I think that became apparent when I spoke about it. But yeah, so I'm hopefully helping out a little bit with some of the legal context along with Anthony whenever he's around.
Definitely. Thank you very much. It's been amazing. I feel like I've known you forever, like everybody else.
Likewise, Glenda.
Likewise. And new friends, and that's another thing that I found, new friends. Glenroy, good evening again. Welcome back.
Greetings. Glenroy Watson. I'm in London. I'm a trade unionist on London Underground. I'm also the secretary of Global African Congress, which is a reparation organization. I'm a Pan-Africanist and very much interested in how we see the pan out of the Windrush thing. Can't remember how I got involved in this actually, but I find it's quite an interesting time to meet with you guys and see what's happening. But I'm, as you know, in London, and there are activities right around the country. But Preston, yeah, let's keep going, see how long I can stay. But yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And again, welcome this evening. Good evening, Sam, my man. You're on mute, Sam.
Hi.
Hi.
To all you new faces and old faces, I was so keen. I thought yesterday was today. I was prepared last night. Rang Glenda, rang Julie. When does the meeting start? She says tomorrow, Sam. And that's so good. This meeting is just so Moorish. So hope you stay. And I was a victim from Mr. Is it? How should I put it? Who started this rubbish? Anyway, and I lost 2 jobs. And I've been rehabilitated by Glenda and Anthony to chat again. So that's me.
Thank you. Thank you. And welcome again. Yes, he called us yesterday and said, I can't get in. Can't get into Zoom. I said, it's tomorrow. Anyway, it's good that you look forward to it. Yeah. Good evening again, Marie. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good evening, Glenda. Good evening. Hi. So my name is Marie Johnson. I live in London, in Hackney, Stoke Newington area, and I'm quite new to this. I've been joining the Thursday session. I think I've joined one Tuesday. I've not been part of the free talk to get information. It was a friend of somebody on a WhatsApp group that told me about this, about the Windrush, and I want to be able to help and kind of educate myself, but help others in any way that I can. I work as a family therapist in child mental health. So I think that children and families will be affected by all of this in communities. Yeah. So I'm here to help.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, Jen, in sunny Spain.
Hi, hi, I'm Jen. I'm originally from Preston and I live in Spain now. If there is a mention of the Wendy Williams independent review, I've made a summary of it in a 20-page PowerPoint. So if anyone's interested, I can send it to you.
Fantastic.
Okay. I've Sueli in fact told me about this event, and I've been coming for about 4 weeks, and I'm learning a lot. So it's really nice to meet everyone. And I see Phil, my old dance teacher, there in the corner. Nice to see you, Phil.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to hear from you as well. And it might be good to put that in the group when we talk about that, because I think it's good, and we've discussed that before. Good evening, Phil. Mr. Kayla. You're on mute. I'll unmute you. I've unmuted you. Welcome from Preston.
All right. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. As briefly as you can. Introduce yourself.
Just introduce myself. As my students said, I'm a director for South and Northwest, and I'm also a director for Community Help Africa / UK. Most importantly, I'm the governor for Preston Culture Framework Board. I represent all community groups that are operating in Preston, especially on the side of it. So there are 4 governors that we have in Preston. I deal with the communities such as yours, and somebody deals with the youth, and the other one deals with the art, and we've got a governor who deals with the photographing, digital things, something different. So my role in there is just to find out with the groups what sort of help they want or they require. Don't mention money. But if some groups have made, they've said, well, we're all right here. We don't need any help. We're fine. But there might be a time when you might want some kind of help from the board, which is the top board for the Preston. So our main job is more strategic. We plan what is needed for the.
Oh, it's froze.
That's where we're going with it.
Oh.
So I've just come in as an observer to see what Windrush is about, because I have no idea.
Sorry, you're breaking up, Phil? It's frozen. Okay, sorry about that. Technical problem there. While we get back Phil, Glenroy we spoke to. Good evening, Michelle. Michelle, can you hear me?
Oh, hello.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi there. I'm calling from my mobile phone. I kind of not by my desk today.
Oh.
And I'm trying to preserve as much power, so I've not put the pictures on. I'm just basically, I've been told to pop along by a lady called Joan Hillary. I don't know if she's come before.
Yes.
She invited me to come along. Last year I did a Windrush exhibition, a touring exhibition in London that toured in London basically, and we spoke to people up and down London. They basically came and recorded piece to cameras about their experiences in the 60s when they came to London. So she said to me, because of that project, I should come and have a listen to people in this group. So I'm coming to find out more about what you guys do. And, you know, it sounds really interesting that you talk every week, and I'd like to see what progress has been made in terms of getting people, you know, what they're due and all that kind of stuff. So I hope that's, I mean, did I miss anything? Hello?
Wendy, you're on mute.
Hi, yes, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I did get all of that. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Lovely, thank you. All right, cheers.
Lovely picture as well. Lovely picture. I think it's Cleta. Is that Cleta C. Roth?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You might have to speak up a bit.
Yeah, I'm Cleta Rathbone. I'm a solicitor, immigration, human rights lawyer. Have been for the past 20 years. I'm from Preston. I attended the first Preston Black Lives Matter protest 3 weeks ago, and spoke, was encouraged to speak by Glenda, spoke, and the footage of that speech went viral, it seems, over, I think, 17,000 hits. Wow. On that in the first week. And I'm kind of here as an observer more than anything, but just seeing the mood and the compassion that people shared at the Black Lives Matter protest. I'm also, I should say, one of the admins and founding members of the Black Lives Matter Preston movement, and basically just trying to see if I can gain any insight as to what can be done utilising these groups to try and create a fairer, more equitable environment for us to live in.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're waiting for Anthony, sorry, and I apologise, he's been in a meeting. So since what happened with the likes of George Floyd and so many people that have throughout time been subjected to, watching my words, shocking, horrific crimes throughout time, for centuries, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And with Windrush, as the co-founder, and because of what's happened to many, many people, and we still are not not done with it, but that's the word that's come. And quite a few people have said to me this week, I thought it was done with. I thought it was all okay, you know, because there was the story this week about, his name's just got out of my head, was offered £250. £250 for the impact that it's caused on his life. There's been so many in the last week. We have people like Sam, like my mum was impacted, and so many people with Windrush. Then Black Lives happened, Black Lives Matter, and George Floyd's story, and many, many others have highlighted that and raised the, I can't think of the word, the bar in raising the awareness. I was contacted and someone asked me if I would speak at an event, and I think Lana's going to be at that event on Thursday, about asking about Preston, if it is a racist city. First thing came into my mind, I said no, but I thought, do you know what, let me ask the public, those in our groups, what their consensus was, and I was astounded by the response. And I thought there'd be more people like me saying no, which of course is going to go into a debate. And again, talking to Anthony Brown, who's the chair of Preston Windrush and also the founder of Windrush Defenders, WDLegal, we said maybe that would be a great conversation this evening. Plus, on the great talk that you gave as well, Glenroy, about identity. And so we don't know how this is going to go tonight. I'm just waiting for Anthony to come on the call. But firstly, what I want to do is introduce, I was trying to wait till he came, Janett, because I know Janett's not got long. So I'm going to introduce Janett first, and she's going to talk about how she came to Black Lives Matter, maybe a little bit of her background, because I know that she's from the legal profession. Well, we sat talking for hours the other night, so I'm just going to let her introduce herself, and we'll take it from there. I ask everybody to mute their mics. If you've got any thoughts that come while Janett is talking, place them in the group. What we do try and do is at the end of a event is that we try and summarize them. You might not have got them yet, but we do try and summarize them and the videos, so that in the future you'll be able to have these to look back on and share with your network. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Janett Walker, and there's the floor, as we say.
There's the floor. Right, well, hello again, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay, first of all?
Yes.
I've been having a few trouble with my Mac and its mic. So, Glenda, again, thank you so much for asking me to come along. Already, I can feel the warmth and the information and the resource emanating from this fantastic group. And Glenda's one of those people that the moment you meet her, you just warm to her, because she's so full of energy and passion and life and wanting to get that information out there and help as many people as she possibly can. So thank you, Glenda, once again for having me here tonight. So basically, I live in Cumbria, which I'm a Yorkshire lass. I'm from Leeds. I was brought up in Chapeltown, so you could probably recognise the Yorkshire accent. But I'm not far up road, as they say, from Preston. You're probably one of our nearest big cities, really. And I've lived in Cumbria for about... Ooh.
If I can ask everybody to mute their mics.
I think they're going. Sorry. So yeah, I've been in Cumbria for about 12 or 13 years, and my original background, the reason for coming up here was basically when I was married at the time, and we bought a guest house and we came to live and work here. But I was actually a lawyer at the time. I was working in London. Lots of you will remember the London borough of Haringey and cases like I worked in the city, but then I moved to Haringey, and cases like Baby P and Victoria Colombier. There were cases that I worked on when I was there. And I've been in the legal I've been an employment lawyer for 18 years. So did a lot of employment law when I came up here. About 3 or 4 years ago, I saw the light and left employment law and left the law full stop, and started in my own company, which is called Flock, and it does corporate events for businesses, along with my business partner, Sophia Newton. And in terms of bringing us, that's a very, very quick sort of run through my last 13, 14 years of life. My parents were Jamaican. I am first generation descendant of the Windrush generation. They came across as part of the Windrush generation. And like everybody, I was affected severely, both emotionally, mentally and physically, when the footage of what happened to George Floyd went viral around the world. And I remember one of the first videos I saw post that video was just a woman a black woman trying to organise a doorstep protest, because obviously we were still in the height of lockdown. She was trying to organise a doorstep protest around the nation in much the same way as we were doing the Clap for Carers every Thursday night. And I shared that video on my Facebook page, and was disappointed isn't the word, but the only word that springs to mind at the moment, at the lack of engagement. There were very few likes, there were no comments at all. And I remember waking up in the early hours of the morning and having another look at that post, because it was obviously bothering me, and there were maybe 3 or 4 more likes. And at that point, I started to write a very long post, just questioning what had happened, why weren't people engaging on a post, what was talking about a man's life, a black man's life being taken but for no other reason than the colour of his skin and police brutality. And expressing my sadness. I wasn't calling anybody out, I was just expressing my sadness and my fears for my daughters. I have 2 little girls, for the future in this world. And I posted that, and finally went back to sleep. And when I got up, when I checked my phone very, very late the next afternoon, the post had gone mad. That second post had gone mad. And my messenger inbox had gone mad, and my personal email had gone mad. And it had gone mad with people who, just like all of us, who are here in Cumbria primarily, but also in other places, all saying things like, it's not that we don't care, we don't know what to say, we don't know what we want to ask questions, we don't want to say the wrong thing, we want to help. How can we help? How can we be better? And myself and Soph, my business partner, at that point realised that actually people wanted to talk. They wanted to have those conversations. They wanted to share. They wanted to engage, and they wanted to help. So we decided that as a business that we would put on a Facebook and Insta live event a week later, whereby they could ask me any question that they wanted to, all those burning questions that they ever wanted to ask about Black people, race, discrimination, racism, institutionalised, you know it, the full gambit. They could ask me all of those questions, and this was going to be a safe place to ask those questions without judgment or backlash, certainly from me or from Sophia or other people who would be in that space. We would all have a pact that that's how we would behave. And we opened that up, and we were shocked and surprised at the number of people who came. We had over 300 people turned up to that live event. We streamed it on Facebook and Instagram. I was more than pretty overwhelmed. I was extremely overwhelmed. I hadn't quite bargained for such a response. The commentary was huge. It took me almost 2 weeks to finish answering all the questions, because after 2 hours of talking, that was enough, and it was time to stop. But there were still loads of questions coming up as a result of that, and that's opened even more floodgates. The leaders here, and we have various, because we're a whole county, there are various local authorities within the county, with leaders in the local authorities who we are now talking to about various things. We have approached several of the primary and secondary schools about Black history being on the curriculum. And it's basically a bit like what's happened to Glenda and Anthony. It's led to people saying, well, what about pulling our own Black Lives Matter Black Lives Matter together? And the reach has been huge. I was saying to Glenda at the start when I first came on the Zoom that we had Anthony's just got in the room. Yeah. We were contacted by the Windrush Legal Angels, who have literally just set themselves up. I think people out there still think that I'm a lawyer. I'm no longer a lawyer. I'm still on the roll, but I don't practice. And asked if we could help, and asked us to shout it out. And I've shouted that out to all my lawyer family, because I know a lot of lawyers out there, and they're having quite a good response to that. So we are at the very early stages of setting up Black Lives Cumbria. One of the big thing that we took away from that live streaming and from what's happened since then is that people want to help. We have a lot of people who are having to really look deep into themselves. Those conversations have been really, really important. People are looking deep into themselves and are saying, one of the things I was getting back quite a lot on the live stream and since then is people saying, I hadn't actually appreciated that I am racist. I have engaged in racist practices. I have had racist thoughts. I have behaved in a racist way. And that's mainly been due to being passive and being able to get away with simply saying, I'm not racist, and that therefore being sufficient. And there's been a real awakening in this movement of people realizing that they need to be more than not just not racist, they need to actively be anti-racist. And there are many, many ways whereby they can actually be anti-racist, you know, from calling out, from speaking up, educating themselves. Knowledge is power. Getting themselves involved in campaigns like this, offering their skills, donating. There are so many things that people can do. And here for Black Lives Matter Cumbria, because I appreciate that every county and many, many cities, whilst we all have this big umbrella of Black Lives Matter, we all also have our individual problems that come down to our own individual areas. And a bit like Glenda, if someone asked me if Cumbria was racist, I would probably say, well, no, not really. But actually, when I sit down and think about that question, really the answer and the conclusion that I have to come to is absolutely goddamn yes. And we have to work with those people and create those conversations and start inspiring change. And that is what is happening with this movement. Slowly, but it's heading in the right direction. And you know, God help us that it continues to go that way. For us as well, we really want businesses on board. We work closely with a lot of corporate companies, and change has to come within them. One of the big problems we have here in Cumbria is there are not many people who look like me. We are a very, very small minority. We take up less than 1% of the Cumbrian population. There's only 500,000 of us in the whole county as it is. Everybody, not just black people. So we are a very, very small place. And of course, that immediately gives everyone, not just businesses, the immediate excuse of being able to say, well, we don't really have that problem here because we don't really have any black people, or we don't have any black people in our workplace. So, you know, we don't have to deal with those problems. It's not enough. That's going back to being, I am not a racist. It's actually not doing anything about racism in our society and the systemic racism that black people face every day. So we have been, since the streaming and all the work that's come from that, we've been invited into businesses to do Zooms on a similar way that we did the online platform. We've been asked to come along and do talks. I've been delighted, as I said, to be invited down here this evening. And the Legal Angels, the Windrush Legal Angels, have also asked me to come along and do a talk with them. And I'm hoping to link Glenda and Anthony up with them as well, because the more legal resources you have for the Windrush campaign, then the better that's going to be for you guys. And this week, pleased to say that we are having our first Black Lives Matter meeting. We haven't set anything up yet in terms of a Facebook, social media presence, or a website, or anything like that. The plan is to get all the black people in the county who have contacted me, and there have been many, into a Zoom like this, and all the black allies, by which I mean people who aren't black, into that meeting too, because I don't want to be, and nor should I be, the face of Black Lives Cumbria. I'm happy to host and facilitate, but it's about us all working together to make sure that we are part of that movement for change, and for everyone to take on roles, and to work out what our aims are going to be, what our values are, what our ethos is, where we want to take this, what our short-term plans are, what our medium-term plans are, and what our long-term plans and aims are, and where we want to find ourselves in 6 months, 3 years, 5 years, and so on. So we're having our first meeting later on this week to start all of that rolling, and we're going to work as a cohesive to think about things like, we will be Black Lives Cumbria, that will be our name, but also to think about how we present position ourselves on social, what our constitution is going to be, what our roles are going to be, who's going to be dealing with what positions of authority, in order to start tackling those and to make those changes. And we have got a massive job ahead of us. I'm going to finish up, but just one last note is that we had a Zoom with the Chief of Staff here in Cumbria a few weeks ago, shortly after the streaming. It was pulled together by a Unite organisation, and the Chief of Staff of Cumbria Police his opening lines were, I don't think that, you know, the police force have any such thing as institutional racism. And everyone, that is not a meeting I organised, by the way. I was invited to it. I would not have arranged a meeting with a man whose values had not been checked out first. That's where we're coming from. That was his position. And all those years of the Macpherson report seem to have somehow passed him by. And why? Because we live in Cumbria and he doesn't believe that it's an issue here, despite the fact that we have race crimes and race hate campaigns just as much as anywhere else. The fact that we're rural and big in terms of space, but small in terms of people, makes no difference to that argument. So we have a long way to go, and we have a lot of conversations that need to be had, and a long way before we get to change. But I'm hopeful, and I think the hashtag, this is a movement, not a moment, is extremely important, and is gonna be the thing that drives us going forward. This is a moment that is unprecedented. This is bigger than the civil rights movement. We are probably not going to see this movement again in our lifetime, so we have to grab it and we have to ride with it all the way and keep it going. And Cumbria is right there beside everybody else, and we are pleased to be working with our neighbours in Preston and Lancaster, in Lancashire, and we are, you know, we're ready to face the storm with you all. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Janett. Again, I always say things always happen for a reason, and it was good to meet you. We were talking like we've met each other, we've known each other for years, so I know we've got a new friend just down the road. Anthony, because we've got a lot of questions there and comments for you, Janett, and I know you've not got long to stay. I just want to say hello, Dave Williams, Fiona, and Anthony Brown, has he got honor, is here. We do want to see you if you can share your screen. Good to see you again, Fiona, and I hope you caught Janett speaking there, because I know that Janett's got to go, and I was going to ask Jen if Jen can help me with the chat room, but we've got a few questions and I'm just trying to find the first question.
I think the first one's from Julia Davidson, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, good. I'm glad you're on it as well. Julia.
Yes, Glenda.
Do you want to ask your question?
I think I've put a couple in there. But
oh, have you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think to what Janett's just said, it infuses me really, because I think she's made some valid points about the need for conversation, and plenty of it, so that we can tackle things that certain departments, whether it be the local authorities or the police themselves, are in denial of accepting that their system is systemic. They need to recognise that fact, and they're failing in their duty of care, in their role, and in their responsibilities to the public. I will come back. I've got some information why I'm saying that, but my question is to Janett is, since you started that live chat forum and you've had the feedback to the extent of it's quite broad, and the responses that you've been given on that forum has enabled you to branch out to your law colleagues, are you now saying that there is justification to have that level of impetus involved in responding to the forum and potential questions coming forward regarding race and racist behaviour?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think we need that support. We need those allies. We need those conversations. We need those people. We've got a whole mindset. We have got 500 years of a mindset to change, and that's not an easy task. People need to get uncomfortable. They need to get uncomfortable in the room. They need to realise that many, not some, but many, or sometimes in many cases, most of their thoughts and behaviour have been wrong. They have come from false information, or information that has not been the complete picture, and their views and attitudes are based on an incomplete history, and they need to start to understand and accept that they have placed those values and their views and their position on that history that has been detrimental to a major part of the human race, and they need to start rethinking those positions and working those out. And we need legal people with us on that, so that those challenges can be made. There is going to be, I would imagine, at some time in the future, we are going to have a claim under the Race Relations Act or some Equality Act against some of these individuals who are going to have to be brought to account. And so we require legal representation in order for that to happen, and to be, there's no reason why we cannot look at the people against the government or members of those particular institutions, the head of police or whoever it may be. So it's absolutely right that we are engaging with those people and making sure that we have them on side, and that they understand the issues. There is no point in getting the chief of police here to talk to us when he doesn't even get it. Those conversations need to be happening with the police force first. They need to be educated. It's not about for me, it's not about race relations training. It's about race relations educating. They don't understand. They don't know. They don't get it. And saying to them that, you need to treat everybody equally.
That's right.
That's great, but it's not reality. They need to be educated as to why.
Fantastic, thank you. And because I'd like you to meet Anthony. I'm going to ask Anthony to turn on his camera.
I'd love to, Glenda, but the camera won't come on. I've been fiddling and trying for quite a while, but I'm not sure why it won't come on.
Okay, well, I'm going to, because Anthony, without going into too much detail, because I know you've not got much time, and I keep saying, but Anthony and I, with conversation, when we do our recaps and catch-ups, I got another fantastic 3-hour, I couldn't even tell you how much that would cost if you had to go to someone professionally, but I got a 3-hour history lesson. So that's one of the reasons why I want to introduce Anthony before we introduce Lana and Suli, because the history of how we got here, I think is vital and very important. So I'm going to introduce Anthony. Anthony, if you could introduce yourself. If you've got any questions, please. There's a lot of questions for you, Janett, as well, and I know you've got to go.
Sorry, I am tapping away in
the chat room.
You keep going, Glenda. Don't worry about me.
Fantastic. So, Anthony, could you introduce yourself, please?
So I'm Anthony Brown. I'm a co-founder of Windrush Defenders Legal Community Interest Company. We are a group of law graduates and lawyers that began to meet as Windrush Defenders back in 2018 when the Windrush scandal broke. There were community meetings, and so we turned up at those meetings and started to help people. Myself, I've been affected by the Windrush scandal, so I was threatened with deportation back in '83. I was born in Jamaica. I came here when I was 6, then went back again, went to school, came back here. Always found the British people great people. I mean, we went to school and we were called names, nigger, wog, all that sort of thing when I was younger. But also going to Jamaica, got into fights because I've been called names there when I returned from England. Live in Wigan. When I came first to Wigan, I couldn't understand. Everybody was calling me love. So I was thinking, what's going on? They were also calling me Billy Boston, and I really didn't understand what that was until later on. I found out that Billy Boston was one of the greatest rugby players that had ever played, and played for Wigan. So it's a kind of hero. So all the time there were these terms of endearment, and yet we're told that, you know, Wigan was one of the largest, had one of the largest votes for the BNP. So what I'm saying is that this question about racism, I think it really is about institutions and not necessarily people, because most of the people that I've engaged with, I just think are great. Yes, of course, I've had racist incidents, but the last time I can remember one was about 2-3 years ago. And I've met thousands, hundreds of people since. So my focus really is on the institutions and the laws, because it was the law that started all this. And back in those days, the law was set by the Roman Catholic Church. And the reason they had a law, which in those days was called a papal bull. I don't know if people have heard of Dom de Fassas. It's a papal bull, which is a ruling that allowed Portugal, or the King of Portugal, Alphonsus, to enslave Saracens, which was the name for Muslims at the time, and pagans, which were the Black Africans. And so Portugal effectively got a concession to begin enslaving pagans and Muslims. And that was sort of payment for Portugal sending forces to help help Christendom fight against Mehmet II, who had invaded Europe and was sort of besieging Constantinople. So that goes back to 1452. And of course, competition between European countries, Spain needed to be in on the act. So Spain got its own concession. And then obviously France, all the others started to compete. But by the Pope making these declarations, it meant that another Catholic country couldn't sort of come and impinge on your claim, if you like. And so there are 3 bulls. There's Dom de Fassas, Romanus Pontifex, and Inter Cetera. And those 3 bulls make up what's called the Doctrine of Discovery. And that is like the foundation of the Western law in the New World. So in America, where you have sometimes conflicts between Native Americans in terms of land rights, I don't know if a few years ago people heard about the pipeline that they wanted to run across Indian land, and it went to court. Well, the American courts recognized Dom de Fassas, or the Doctrine of Discovery, and the rights that gave to Catholic country Spain to take these lands. And then the colonists then took over those rights, and so therefore the courts were still able to rule based on that. So the history is quite long and quite ingrained. It's 500 years and counting. And so on the back of that, those lands were taken. Britain got in on the act after the Battle of Preston, at the end of the Second English Civil War. Oliver Cromwell built up the navy and sent them off to capture Hispaniola because he wanted a piece of the action. That failed, so they took Jamaica instead. And Jamaica was then, in 1655, made a British colony. African people, they weren't slaves when they were taken. They were people, and then they were enslaved in Jamaica to create wealth for Britain. And that went on until 1833, when the Emancipation Act was passed. Before that, we'd had what was called the abolition of the Atlantic Slave Trade Act. That was in 1807. That just meant that no more Africans were supposed to be taken from Africa and enslaved, but slavery still went on. And after emancipation, people in Jamaica and the Caribbean were just left to their own devices, no development, no compensation, no investment, until in 1962, the British government then passed a law to say that they were independent and they couldn't be citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies anymore, which meant that my dad, who was living here, lost his citizenship. He became Jamaican by that law. I, who came to join him, was Jamaican. And so Jamaicans and others who became independent lost their rights to come here, work and study and settle. And since then, the immigration laws have further whittled away their rights. In 1971, the Immigration Act was passed, and that meant that unless you had a father or a grandfather that was born here, you couldn't claim the right to be a British citizen. 81 British Nationality Act came in. You could naturalise and pay for what you were born free with, but many people didn't take up that opportunity. And then in 2014, Theresa May passed the Immigration Act that saw that the border come into the NHS, your employment, renting a house. You had to show your passport to receive any of these services or continue working. And because a lot of people hadn't naturalised or hadn't registered their indefinite leave to remain, they didn't have the right documents to show they had legal status in the UK. And then the Home Office started to enforce the immigration law and began putting people in detention. And you've seen all the horror stories of what's happened to people. People were deported, people were denied access to the NHS, people died in the street because of all the stress that they were under. People suffered ill health because of all the anxiety. They lost their jobs, lost their homes, and it's still happening, because up until recently, people coming into the surgery that we run on a Wednesday and saying that they were facing the sack because they hadn't got the documents to prove their legal status. So the Windrush scheme is supposed to give people the documents that they should have had, and I myself was able to reclaim my citizenship free of charge. And they've also now got the compensation scheme in place where people can claim compensation for all the trauma that they've suffered. But the bureaucracy of it all means that not many people are coming forward. And then when people do come forward, it's taking forever and a day to process these claims. People have been waiting for 9 months, 12 months. Sometimes when they do process the claims and they do make an offer, it's a pittance compared to what people have suffered. So, for example, we have Glenda Caesar, who is a regular on our forum. I don't know if Glenda's here tonight, but she was offered £22,000 after being sacked from her job for over 10 years ago. So she had to manage on her daughter's allowance and struggled for that time, and then applied to the compensation scheme, was offered 22,000. So she went on the news and we heard it and thought, okay, well, we'll see how that one works out, but we still haven't heard whether or not she's got the right amount of money. So that's where we are today. Glenda and I are part of what's called the Windrush Stakeholders Advisory Group, and this is a group of people who are involved in Windrush activities around the country that go to the Home Office and advise the Home Office as to what's happening in our area and some of the issues that we find and need to see changed. I had a bit of a concern when they first said that we should visit and then pay our fare. I was thinking, the last time they offered to pay me fare, it was to deport me. So I had to think very carefully about that. But anyway, we've been trying to work with the Home Office to help people get their status and so on. And the last thing that we did was we constructed a letter on Windrush Day to set out all the issues that we find with the Windrush scheme and the compensation scheme. And I'm grateful for all the help that people in FreeTalk gave, in particular Emma, also a barrister who helped us to put our ideas together and draft that letter. And that's been sent to the Home Secretary through our contact Dan Hobbs at the Home Office. So we're waiting on a response there. So that's Windrush Defenders Legal CIC. Oh, we had a conference on Windrush Day as well, and we covered 5 themes: community cohesion, criminal justice, education, health and work. And we're looking at all the race disparities that are in those areas and how to tackle them. And we had some great speakers, including Professor Sir Geoffrey Godfrey from Scotland, police officers, people who work within the NHS, lawyers, people in the community, and young people who, did an intergenerational discussion about the issues that are involved in those areas. And they're going to do a report, and further work is going to come from that, for hopefully for the government, but also in particular for the community. So we're working on various groups to see how we can act on the information that we got from that conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I want to just ask, because if you could put your hand up, everybody who's here, and this is just a question, do you understand what the Windrush scandal is? Just put your hand up. There's a button there and it says reaction. If you know what it is, just put your hand up. I'm just looking. Okay, thank you. Okay, for those who don't, can you put your hand up? So can I ask all those who don't know what Windrush is?
I can't get mine down.
Okay, because what I tend to find that a lot of people don't know about Windrush, and I'm always saying, oh, when you get there, you know what I mean? It's like going down a rabbit hole. And I just wanted to ask that question just to see how and who knows about Windrush. And I think because it is an interesting topic, but it is affecting so many people's lives. Anthony, is there anything else you wanted to say, especially about hate, crime, racism, and the link with Windrush and Black Lives Matter? Because Janett's here, Janett Walker's here. You missed the introduction, but I really want you to link with Janett, and Kalita's here as well. So there's a lot of people here, especially from the legal background, but I just wanted you to touch on that.
So for me, as I've just described, Windrush covers a whole range of issues in terms of people's lived experience with regards to the NHS, with work, with activities in the community, with the police. And for me, the distinction with Black Lives Matters is that Black Lives Matter is, well, started out as a focus on police brutality in the States, and how, for quite a while, black men have been abused and killed by the police in the States. And the video of George Floyd being murdered in the streets by a police officer kneeling on his neck just shocked and disgusted the world. And so that whole issue has now become a global issue. But why the police felt confident that they could behave like that was because of the racist environment, the racist institution that the police is. And so we then, I think, needs to start to consider what racism is. Now, I was disputing last week that you know, racism for me really isn't about calling names, because you know, people can call me all sorts of names and it doesn't really bother me today. But when I go for a job and I can't get that job because, you know, of an institutionally racist organization, then that does affect me and my family and a lot more. And we need to know how we can, where that's come from. And that came from this Dum Difasas, that papal bull, which began the process of bringing into law that difference of consideration about, you know, pagans and Muslims. And in order to perpetuate the trade that then developed, other laws were brought in on top of that. So laws that then made African people property. Now, in order to maintain that, you then had to somehow claim that these people were somehow different, were somehow subhuman. And how people did that, you had people in the 18th century that called themselves scientists, but they were pseudoscientists, and decided on various characteristics that there were these different races. So they'd take the shape of people's heads, or curls in the hair, or size of their nose, or the shades of their skin, and decide that that constituted, you know, a different race. Before that, I was seeing in a video recently that race was around your family. So your extended family or your clan was considered a race, but that was the old consideration. But in the 18th century, when they needed to have a reason to say to people it was okay to brutalize and treat people like animals, was to come up with these pseudoscience ideas that became a philosophy, and it permeated all kinds of institutions, and people were educated on the basis that the Europeans were a superior race and that they could go out and dominate the rest of the world. And that's where you got this whole philosophy of white supremacy and racism coming in over the years. And if you then understand that, you can then try to look to see how you're going to dismantle that. And really, it's about the law. So you've got to start to seeing how you can repeal the law and tackle the various institutions that are governed by these laws and these practices. Yes, there are people who behave in obnoxious ways and abuse other people, but the law has determined that that is called a hate crime. So that's where I distinguish between calling names and racism. I say that calling names can be a hate crime, and racism is something that is based on law, and it's based on you know, institutions.
Thank you for that. And on that note, I know you've all got lots of questions. I'm just asking you to bear on. I'm going to bring in Sue Lee, and I think she's also going to introduce Lana, because you've got questions about hate crime and racism. And I think me and Sue Lee have had many discussions about this for tonight. Glenroy, I know you've got your hand up for questions. If you just bear with me, They're only going to speak for 10, 15 minutes, and then you've got your question will be answered, I'm sure. So I'm going to bring on Suli because I know we get late, and I know we can stay till late, but I just want to bring in Suli and Lana. Suli, do you want to introduce yourself, and Lana, just so that for this evening of where we're going with this?
Okay, hi everyone, good evening. And most of you are already familiar with me, so I've been here almost every week when I can. I am here wearing my main hat of Equality, Diversity, Inclusion and Communities Officer at UCLan University. So my line of work has been pretty much based on raising awareness, bringing the agenda, the equality, diversity, inclusion to light, and we do like pretty serious work, not to only pay lip service, but to have the real, and then it's a really, really tough job to change culture. So the university, with the latest incidents, we did some work with the BAME network. I know some people don't like the BAME, and then that is another conversation. But I work with the Black and other ethnic minorities, non-white staff group, and then we kind of asked the leadership of the university, because we couldn't hear anything about the Black Lives Matter support as a staff, and being a person of color, staff and students felt they needed to have that positive action from the university to declare how supportive they are, how important it is to organizations to declare publicly, because we had at that moment only internally some internal kind of comms came out, but it wasn't enough. We wanted something pretty much public. So, and then we did have a very positive outcome on that campaign. We did internally, and then the university, and then it's not a lot of university who did it. They didn't feel comfortable about putting this declaration. So this is what we've been working in the university to try to bring this conversation, because it becomes quite uncomfortable. I've been delivering some awareness raising sessions. There is a lot of training needs. There is a lot of insecurity, and people don't know what language to use. They don't know what that involves, and people feel, especially white people, feel pretty much insecure, and then sometimes it's very much more their problem than the people of color problem to find comfortable. So we're trying to facilitate that. And then from last week's session, when Glenroy brilliantly presented the very, very thought-provoking theme of identity, and Glenda rang me and then said, "Sally, can you revisit the Equality Act in 10 minutes?" So the Equality Act is about nearly 300 pages, and is a very complex piece of law. But I remember Emma saying the legislation doesn't recognize identity. I kind of said, I think the closest the Equality Act is the closest that the legislation, in my perception, talks about and recognizes identity. So there are 9 characteristics of this Equality Act. I'm a bit of PowerPoint.
You want the PowerPoint?
Can I share my screen?
Yes, of course you can.
I know it's late of the night, and
no, that's fine. That's fine. So I've made you co-host so you can share your screen.
Oh, okay, thank you very much, Wanda. So yeah, the Equality Act, it's 9 categories there, and then I think that says a lot about identity. So these 9 categories or characteristics are disability, age, gender reassignment, marriage, civil partnerships, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion and belief, and sex. I have a bit of a problem with sex and gender assignment because I think, what is that? You know, sex and gender reassignment. Basically, gender reassignment is only a portion what gender identity is. So you have transgender, and you have cisgender, and you have non-binary people. This is all about gender identity. Whilst sexual orientation, this triangle, sexual orientation, sex, and gender reassignment are quite complex to explain, and then maybe we can explore that in the future sessions. We do this sort of education to bring to light what the Equality Act says is basically there is a public, I believe Julia already mentioned about the public equality duty, and that public equality duty basically says it's a responsibility of your employer, as rightly so Andrew said. They need to protect the employer, the employee, against discrimination, harassment, victimization. That includes racism and other types of prejudice and discrimination in the workplace. And the legislation also said, because you have quite conflicts between these protected characteristic groups, let's say religion might not agree with elements of the sexual orientation, but they still protected characteristics. And then the Equality Act says you need to foster good relationship between these characteristics, where we can respect each other, and then there is no place for anybody imposing their identity or their characteristic on another person, and then not being accepting, not be respectful. I don't personally like the word tolerance. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be respected. So, and this is what the Equality Act brings. They are under revision, a few things they're revising. But when you go to talk about Equality Act and hate crime, one thing you need to see is there are 5 only protected elements in the hate crime law, which are this age, disability, gender reassignment, which is the trans kind of population, race, religion and belief, and the sexual orientation, anyone.
Sorry to interrupt you, Suli. So protected characteristics, these are in the Equality Act 2010.
The 9 are in the Equality Act.
Yes. And they are protected. Do you know what that means when they say protected characteristics? Sorry.
Yeah, it's like an extra protection, because let's say someone is belonging to, you are heterosexual, or you are homosexual, or you are someone who bisexual, let's say, and because you have these characteristics and you declare that publicly, and then it's something sometimes you need to have in a workplace to protect, let's say, disability, for example, as well. You have to have protections in place for these groups to ensure they are not excluded. So you cannot exclude someone from a promotion because he's a wheelchair user, or you cannot deny to offer an employment for a person who had any disability.
And a person could be many of those.
Many of those, obviously, and then there is the intersectionality. You can have a person of color, for example, Black or Asian or any other minority ethnic, and also could be disabled, or could be, you know, have a sexual orientation as a gay person or a lesbian or a trans person, could be the other gender, or it could be a woman or could be a man, because sex is gender basically. The sex is the gender that is given to the identity the doctor gives to a child when he's born based on the genitalia, let's say, and then that is a woman or a man, and then there is intersex people as well. So where do they sit? So let's say the protected characteristic is like to say everyone here is equal, a man and a woman, a person of color and a white person, someone who is a Buddhist and someone is a, you know, a Muslim person, a Jewish person. So someone who is single, so you cannot prioritize promotion to someone who, because that person is single and then have no children. That is pregnancy and maternity as well. If you have a job and then you get pregnant, and then after your maternity leave, you come back to work and then you can be demoted. So the law protects these groups with the characteristics. And you cannot be discriminating about your age either. Oh no, you're too old. You cannot put in job descriptions or job prescriptions in your job role. There are exceptions, obviously, in terms of sex. For example, see if you're working on a shelter for women who's been abused sexually, and then in certain roles they not accept men, and then that is accepted. There are some very, very small exceptions for these roles. For someone who is for certain faith, and you have women only groups that they can only go for these sessions, let's say training sessions or something like that. So you need to cater for all these groups. Let's say someone who is blind, a student or a staff, and then you have a session on Zoom or any other online or face-to-face, and materials are not provided for, adapted to this person. So this is what this protected means.
Thank you. So when it comes to hate crime and racism, I'm going to try and word this properly. Is racism a criminal act? Okay. And is there a difference between a hate crime and a racist act? A hate act and a racist act, if that makes sense. Because this, okay, because I think this is where we were talking, and I know we talked earlier about getting justice for these particular crimes, because I think that's where people get confused. So continue, sorry.
If I come in on there,
I'll let Lana answer that one.
Your hate crime, we do have racially and religiously aggravated crimes per se, and that came about as a result of the Stephen Lawrence.
You might have to speak up, sorry, Lana.
We do have racially and religiously motivated crimes per se, so that we have those that legislation in place per se, and that came about because of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. So your racially aggravated assaults, your racially aggravated public orders. When you talk about hate crime, there are 5 protected characteristics, which race and religion is one of those. And then you have the other 4, which is transgender, disability, homophobic, and what's the other one?
Sorry. Religion.
Religion, yeah. Well, religion comes under the. So, racism is. You also have incidents and crime. So something might, if somebody has a perception that something is racist to them, it will still be recorded. And only up until, I think it was 3 years ago, we didn't record those. And as a result of Home Office classifications, they are now recorded. So if somebody says something, like I'm trying to think of something,
racist slur
Yeah,
on
like
the bus.
a slur or something, but it doesn't actually reach the threshold of a crime, it would be recorded as a racist incident or a hate incident. So it might be towards disability, it might be towards race and ethnicity. I think getting back to just a few comments from the conversation that I've heard tonight, there's a couple of things for me. The history is very, very important, and I'm going to be quite controversial here because I'm 2 years into this role as Community Cohesion Sergeant, so I'm relatively new. I'm learning every single day. I will hold my hand up and say my history was probably my least favourite subject at school. I didn't hear anything about the Windrush, and I only heard about the Windrush in the role that I'm in today, and a little bit when I was a neighbourhood sergeant, so sort of in the last 5 years. And I'm ashamed to say that. And only in the last couple of weeks, since all this Black Lives Matter, and I've sort of researched it a bit more, again, I'm ashamed to see that there is false news being reported. So I think I saw something that was going on Facebook about the Irish, so-called Irish slaves that were deported, that's the sort of stuff that causes division. That's the sort of stuff that breaks down communities, and that's where I think you guys, as a collective, can have a big impact on reporting what needs to be reported, i.e. the facts, what really did happen. And it's unfortunately because we live in a social media frenzied community now. People live and breathe on what they see and read, and it's actually trying to dig out the facts from the fiction, which is very difficult because we're on a losing battle with that sometimes. But I think that's what is key, and I think that the other key thing is the education, and that needs to start early. And there's a story to tell about the Windrush, and that needs to be told, but there's also a story to be told about racism in general and diversity and inclusion. And Jane Elliott, I'm sure some of you will have seen the brown-eyed, blue-eyed experiment in the 60s, very, very impactful. But when you peel back the bones, none of us are born racist. None of us are born with that hatred. And unfortunately, it's drip-fed into us from a very early age, and that might be, I can speak from my experiences. I grew up in Nigeria up until I was 10 years old. So I experienced good and bad in Nigeria, but then I grew up in Northern Ireland, and we all know about the story in the 80s and 90s and still today about the division between the Protestants and Catholics. So I can't walk in your shoes because I know that, different stories to tell, but I can empathise and know that sometimes it really does make you feel passionate about your identity and where you're from, and I can relate to that. And I think that's why we need to, as Janett said, we do need to keep these conversations going, which brings me on to my next point about police institutionalised racism that is talked about worldwide. Certainly from my experience, I've been a cop 23 years. I have visited other cop establishments around the world, and unfortunately we don't all sing from the same hymn sheet. We all operate differently. I am proud to say that I'm a British police officer. I haven't always had it easy, and it's not an easy job. We're in the process, our business is in the process of taking people's liberty when things go wrong. So obviously we are under scrutiny, and rightly so, we should be under scrutiny. What I can say is part of my role is to try and try and encourage people to come and be part of our police family. And that is very, very difficult when people probably don't understand actually what we do and what we get up to. And I would invite any of you in to come and see what happens and what goes on within Lancashire Constabulary. In fact, only this week, our Chief Constable wrote a blog about the what's going on. And part of my role as Community Cohesion Sergeant is I've got to monitor on a daily basis, I've got to monitor what is happening around our country because of what happened with George. So things happen across the other side of the world, and it impacts on how I do my job. So, you know, what happened to George, what happened with the terrorist attacks in New Zealand, etc., impacts on what happens in Preston. And that's really hard to believe, but actually it's a fact of life because we are so interconnected these days. And it's, for me, these conversations are long overdue, and we really still need to have them, and we need to be open and honest. And I'm going to see if I can get permission from my Chief Constable to let you read his blog, because it's actually very moving. And I'll touch on it. People who get diversity, inclusion, racism, those subjects, those tend to be people who have either walked, I felt, you know, under attack or felt threatened, or have walked a difficult journey in their past for whatever reason. Maybe have had to fight harder to get that promotion, or you know, put themselves forward and climb different hurdles more than some because of who they are and what they look like. And yes, that is wrong. Everybody should be on a level playing field. We as an organisation welcome people from all backgrounds. Lancashire is in the top 50 on the Stonewall employers, but for me, we've still got a far way to go. And the question I put to you guys is a very interesting one, and we debate it all the time at work, because some of my bosses think, right, for the police to be trusted by the community, we need to have a workforce that is representative of our community. And does that mean having people from Asian backgrounds, African Caribbean backgrounds, African backgrounds, Polish backgrounds? Does it mean having a whole spectrum of people, or does it mean everybody that works for that police family should have an understanding and should know what diversity is? Because actually, I could send 2 cops to, I'm trying to think of a job, an honour-based violence job, for instance, and I might send a white cop and an Asian cop, and you know what? The white cop might deal with that better than the Asian cop, colour of skin, because of their background or who they are as a person, as an individual. But do they understand that diversity? So my question to you is, does our workforce need to be visibly representative, or does it need to look at diversity running through the veins of everybody that works for that police family?
Can I just come in here, Glenda, and ask and just clarify something with is it Lana?
Yes.
You mentioned about the Irish, and I think you were questioning whether or not they were slaves. Is that correct?
Well, I only because I looked at it literally a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't have time to research it further. From what I saw, there was a lot of false news around the 80s and 90s, and it was obviously creating division. And I think it was a takeaway from the Windrush what actually happened.
I think
it was false news. Is that right?
It's fake news, because I had a combat with a Facebook from a person I know from my circle, and I have to properly educate this person on that sense, because the question, and then this is the narrative of the white supremacist groups led by Tom Robinson, and they say all lives matter. So this is, you probably all have heard now quite often, these groups, nationalists and people who are just they don't know the truth, and they put in why, and there are a series of posts about all lives matter, and then look at the situation of the working class, British working class. You have the Irish slaves, and then all that kind of thing, when it's only the miners where they were. So I found the blog of the academic.
It was a black and white photograph, wasn't it?
Yeah, but there is more than one. I'm gonna put here on the chat the academic. It started in America, and there is a series of photos. It's not only that, there is the children. They said Irish children forced work that was a farm in Texas.
Can you? Yeah. Thank you.
So just let me answer now.
Just one sec. Can I just ask Suli if she can send back the screen? And is that all right? Have you finished, Suli? Before you start, Suli and Lana.
I haven't, because you asked me just to. We never have a time to talk about how to report the crimes, but I will.
Can I speak to Lorna?
Yeah, before you do that, just let me deal with this Irish question. I don't know about what Tommy Robinson's saying. I'm going to talk about my own experience. So growing up, I always had a sort of closer affinity with Irish people, and I couldn't understand why. And then when I started to look into the history of it, we found that in the Caribbean, there were Irish slaves. They were taken to the Caribbean and enslaved, and in the Americans. And if you look at the history of an island called Montserrat, you'll notice that their national symbol is the shamrock. And that's because of the strong Irish presence on that island. And you'll find that the people in Montserrat are very close with the Irish. They follow St. Patrick's Day. A lot of the traditions are always wearing green and all that sort of stuff. So in the Caribbean, there's a lot of connections with the Irish, as well as other groups. Also, I don't know if people have heard about the Barbary Pirates, but in North Africa, there was a group there that used to come and take people from Ireland and take them to the slave markets in the Middle East and sell Irish people. So there is a long history of Irish people being enslaved in the Caribbean and in North Africa.
Brenda, can I just jump in? Go in a minute.
I would say yes, because you come from them countries.
Brenda, can I come in without going in a minute?
Yeah, but can we just let Lorna finish and then you'll be next?
Yeah, it was a question to Lorna.
Go on.
Lorna.
I was just going to answer Lorna on that.
Go ahead.
She said, go ahead.
Yeah, when you said about should the police mix people in the police force, I don't think that is the most important thing that people are asking for. They are saying that the system has to change the way the police people. Because if you look at even in South Africa, they've changed, but they just adopted the same system. And the majority of the people who are policemen are blacks, but they still treat people badly. So it's the system that is wrong that needs to look into it. Anybody can get the job if they want to. It's not the mix of people that will change things. It's the system of policing, like training, how,
See, so it is, you can, all cops will get so much diversity training when they join.
Yeah. I think Emma hit it very good. Emma, who came in before, is a solicitor. She pointed very good points there before. I think the education, the top down, I think we should think strategically as how we can deal with this. I think by involving the top bosses to have workshops with them, like this conversation that you're having now, exactly. I think it needs the top people make decisions to understand what you're talking about. I think the conversation we've had has been very rich and very helpful, but it needs the top people to understand it. One of the directors from the Art Council, I don't know whether you know Darren Henley, he's the CEO for the Art Council. He's emailed me. I'll send it to Brenda so she can circulate to everybody. And he's written something about the Black Lives Matters. And he said himself, we are ignorant. The system is actually failing people.
Yeah, I
thank you.
Lana, before you come back, let me just say something about that point about training. I've worked with the police. I've worked with the College of Policing. And the job that I did, I had to interview inspectors and superintendents who were coming into the police from this new approach that they had to take people from other industries to sort of diversify the police thinking. Usually police have to join at 20 and then, you know, work their way through the ranks. Here they were bringing in people, and I was part of a program that looked at, you know, recruiting. And I looked at the materials that the College of Policing had, and it was absolutely brilliant in terms of what it was doing in training people about unconscious bias and the kind of checks that they had for people joining the force. And the people that I interviewed in terms of superintendents and inspectors, the caliber of people were absolutely brilliant. I cannot fault the training, I cannot fault the people. Yet, when you look at the outcomes, they are still, you still have the same ratio. I remember we showed a slide on here in terms of police stops of black people. 10 years ago, you know, it was 8 to 1. And, you know, the number of stops was much higher. The number of stops now are lower, but the ratio is still 8 to 1. So somehow that institution is still behaving in the same way. So in terms of your question, I wouldn't look at, you know, the mix of people and how you tackle the situation. I would look at the outcomes. I'd look at how many black people are dying in police custody and why. How are black people treated when, you know, they are brought into custody? When they're stopped, how many are being tasered and things like that?
Yes.
That's the outcomes are what you need to look at and put in place strategies and policies to get rid of those disparities.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just before we go to the question and answers, and touching on what you just said, Anthony, I saw a video last night about a friend of ours in the community, Bradley, and it's a shame because he's not here tonight, and he was supposed to be here. Now, Bradley is a roofer, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly. And this happened yesterday at 5 o'clock. The police got a phone call. As I'm going to put it, I can't paraphrase it because exactly what happened, but it is, the video is on the Black Lives Matter page, and the police have got a phone call to say that there's a guy on a roof, and it's alleged that he was removing lead. Now, what apparently is a guy who's a roofer. He's a black guy, very well known in the community, and six police officers arrive at the scene, which created a lot of discourse, especially because you've got it it's videoed, which is good. I'm all for, because I think that's what the word is right now. At the end of the day, you've got the public are seeing and identifying whether there's a crime going on or not. So what I'm trying to say is that education, but like I think it was Dave who said it actually, Silver Afro TV. I think he said today on his program, he said, I think it's about you question the outcome. If you can see, it says roofer on the van. As you pull up as a police officer or however many you are, oh, it's a roofer. Oh, well, I think there's something not right here. So you question the outcome that's happened and deal with it. And I think that is what needs to be done with not just police officers or the establishment or the business, but I think people in general. I think we're too quick as well to make assumptions and judge people. And I just wanted to raise that because what happened with Bradley last night could have escalated to something worse, and it didn't because of videoing it. I'm glad his wife was there, but also to share what is actually going on. Okay. I just wanted to say that, and then I'm going to let Suli finish and Lana. And honestly, it's really good. We're on track really, because usually time's gone by and it's like 12 o'clock. So Suli, do you want to finish? Again, what we were trying to understand is racism and hate crime, and people knowing the difference, yeah, and what they can do about it. Because I think a lot of people are not doing the reporting of the crime. Okay.
Yes, so going back to the first session, we had quite a lot of time to discuss about managing expectations when people report any hate incident or hate crime. Because one thing we need to realize is you need to identify the motive of the offense, let's say, because you have the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 that defines you know, public order, harassment, common assault, actual and grievous bodily harm, criminal damage. All these are normal offenses, but if you look at these 5 protected characteristics, and if this offense is against and is motivated, and you can prove this has been motivated by religious or racial, let's say, discrimination, and there is enhancement on the sentence these perpetrators will face in the legal, in the justice system. So, and then can I just, we had a discussion about that on the first session, and was quite, oh no, you're not letting me share, was quite a big debate. And then let's say if you usually have a fine for a normal public order offense, if it's, let's say 6 months for a non-hate crime aggravated, if he can prove it's a hate crime aggravated, from 6 months, you can get up to 2 years. So there is you know, a bigger, let's say, uplift, let's call.
It's that sentencing stage. So
exactly.
There are certain crimes that come with it naturally. So your racially and religiously aggravated crimes will be automatic. But if you have any of the other hate crimes, you can apply for a sentence of that.
Yeah. So anyone, so as I said before, hate crime can be perceived by the victim, but also by anyone else. And then we've been doing some work with the university and with Lana and Ash about, you know, bringing these possibilities for people to realize how it doesn't matter if you witness any incident and you perceive that as a prejudice, hostility, and then it is a hate crime. If you are on the bus or if you are in the takeaway shop and then someone say, you Chinese, you brought this virus here to our country. And it's been happening quite a lot, hasn't it? The Chinese community has been facing a lot of discrimination as well because of the COVID-19. So if you are outside or in the takeaway and then you witness that, if you can use your mobile and you can film the incident, you can upload that, you can report that anonymously, or you can.
I mean, I think it's very important to report it, and I think historically, I think one of our biggest pieces of work is actually is trying to tell people, regardless of whether we have a line of inquiry or not, you must report it. So I'll give you an example. Probably the older generation, possibly. They may get called names, or I'm just thinking of public order situations on the street where get called offensive names maybe on their same route to work every day, but they never report it. Well, if they don't report it, we don't know about it. We can't do anything about it. Even if they do report it and there are no leads, we still need to know about it, because crime statistics will give us access to funding to do other things. We have a risk and threat meeting every day, and if we see that there is a pocket of racial tension in, I don't know, Deepdale, Plungington, wherever it might be in Preston, we will then send more resources and more officers into that area, and start having conversations with the community. So if we don't know about it, and I know it's difficult, because if you, for instance, officers, when I've been party of this as a police officer. So when we're out doing our job, and maybe we get into an arrest of somebody who's drunk or whatever, they will turn around and call us names because we are taking away their liberty. They don't want to be arrested. So I've been called all sorts of names throughout my career. I was offered out to fight on last Wednesday when I was covering nights on 3 occasions. I was told I was going to get my head kicked off, and that's a daily occurrence. Wow. However, if you are a black officer, or openly gay or whatever, they may start hurling abuse at you because of those protected characteristics. And the officer might not want to report that because it means extra paperwork for them. Is that right, or is that not? Is that correct, or should it be reported? It should be reported, because we can't change anything if we don't know about it. But I empathise with the officer, because they have an extra work to do because of what they look like, and because they're getting picked on. So by the individual that's being arrested and being called names, but ultimately that could be a racially aggravated offence because they're being picked on because of the colour of their skin.
Thank you. I just want to, before you come in, Jen, I really appreciate Lana and Suli for sharing and speaking about the hate crime. And again, I think that this again will go on to part 3, but there's so many people that want to speak at the moment. So thank you very much for sharing. I hope you do come back, Lana, and share it with the force. Again, we always, because we've had Clive on his at the beginning, and Clive Grunshaw and the police commissioner, and we welcome everybody to join in the conversation with us here on a Tuesday. Glenroy's been waiting since the beginning of time.
One quick thing, Glenda.
Sorry.
I put on the chat the ways to report any hate crime on incident.
Yes, I was going to ask. Yes, I was going to say that.
Just put that on the chat. So
yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Because we did want to get, but the time's going on, and I just really want to get as many people with their questions, and because I think Glenroy's got a question for you both, or for Anthony. Glenroy, do you want to ask?
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, the issue about the Windrush, it's always concerned me, as you know, the expression about people shouldn't see this as some sort of first incident of racism. I really sometimes get the impression when people said, I've never heard about this, I never know about this. You know, but racism has blighted this country for so many years. I've just put down on the chat the issue of Charles Wharton, who was murdered in Liverpool. And the story goes that, you know, 2 policemen had caught him and in essence handed him over to the mob for him to be murdered. So I consider that early police collaboration. Anthony, forgive me if I misunderstood you, but I thought you were suggesting that because structures exist in the police in the US was why the policeman felt he could kneel on George Floyd's neck whilst being videotaped. I may have misunderstood you, so forgive me. Because if it is that it was because they thought they were protected by the law, I don't think that was their reason for their blatant behavior. They believe that the society that they live in have such small, such low value for Black lives that they would get away with it. So I don't know if it's a matter of legality, it's a matter of other police officer not intervening, not giving evidence against them so they can do any wrongdoings, you know, because the idea of videoing has been going on for some time. The police officer was seen beating up somebody viciously with baton and what have you, Mr. King, and they went to court and they got away with it. So I think it's something really endemic, not only in the US, but here about the behavior of police officer who know that society, if they blink, they wouldn't do it for very long. So it really does bother me if we interpret it in that way. Sully, I was just wondering whether, I know in the early stage of the legislation, the church had sought and may have obtained certain exemption because of issues about how they organize vis-a-vis gender issue. I just wonder whether those characteristics have now been removed, or are they still specific abstention for the religious profession? There were some other things, Glenda, but I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you for raising those points.
If I could just answer that point then about the police in America and what I was saying. Just to explain, law is made by politicians in Parliament who get voted in by people with certain attitudes and beliefs and education. So if you've got a lot of people in society with those attitudes and beliefs and education, they will put laws in place that protect people who do those heinous crimes, like kneel on somebody's neck in the streets and then they get off. So when you saw Rodney King being beaten, the law allowed those people to get off because, you know, the law says he has to be convicted of a jury, you know, with a jury of his peers. And if you've got a white jury that says he's not guilty, then that's the law. But if you change the law so that, you know, the jury could be more diverse, maybe there'll be different outcomes. But will anybody change the law in that way? Will that society allow more police officers to be put on trial? No, they won't, because they've got this history and these attitudes. So that's what I mean when I say that the law or the police force has certain, is an institution that he has developed in, which allows him to think that he can behave in that way with impunity. And a lot of police officers have been doing it for centuries. I mean, the police in America was founded to go after and kill black people. So it's not surprising that, you know, culturally they're still doing the same thing, you know, hundreds of years later.
But then, sorry, Glenda, but you know, that doesn't explain why police officer in this country does the same thing. You know, and what is
it does, because you've got people with attitudes.
But they weren't slave catchers; they were Bow Street runner, etc., etc. But really, go back to the issue of a jury of your peer. Mm-hmm. Everyone is a member of those police officer peer. What happens is a manipulation of the system, and they feel confident that there will be a jury of whites only or whatever appropriate. So I don't think that's not a legal. The law doesn't make for that.
You're making my point, and the law in the States allows them to do that. And what I'm saying over here is you have people who have been developing. The country has had racist institution. It instituted slavery across the Commonwealth, in America, in Canada, in the Caribbean. So, you know, places like Oxford, Glasgow University has recently said that they would give £200 million for reparations because of how they benefited from the slave trade. So institutionally, you have these racist beliefs and philosophy that's ingrained in British society, and that's why when you get people from British society joining the British police force, you get the kind of outcomes that you get.
Right, okay. I've got Emma, and then Jen. Glenroy, it says that's not a definition of the law, Anthony. So I've got Emma first and then Jen, I think.
Hi, Lana. I just wanted to ask actually, the story, I know you won't have been involved in this personally or anything like that, but I'm curious to know what approach you think there should be, or what kind of response there might have been to the person who called the police about a roofer. Would anyone ever have gone back to that person to say, why did you call us? You've wasted police time. They were obviously a roofer. The sign was on the van. It's clearly a problem you have, and maybe to try to deal with the people who are actually using the police as a weapon against the community, perhaps.
I would have to, yeah, I don't know details of the case, but I can certainly look into it. I would say if we get a lot of reports, malicious reports, and all those reports have to be investigated, so we would have deployed regardless. Whether anybody has gone back, I would probably say no, they probably haven't, but I can certainly look and find out. But it's a very valid and good point to make, because what was it that roofer did to cause them concern?
Besides the colour of their skin, yeah.
Unconscious bias that it was a black man on.
Yeah.
Was Bradley a black man, I presume, because we're talking about this issue. Again, my assumption was, you know, it's a valid point, but I can certainly look into it.
Thank you.
I mean, more just, do you think there should be some kind of, not I don't know if it should be a repercussion or some kind of conversation that has to happen after that. Do you think that's?
If we pick something up in my office, I would go back. So I've had a few cases where I can think of one with regards to travellers where I've actually gone back to the informant and given them some suitable words of advice on, their unconscious bias that they're clearly displaying. I can think of a couple of occasions that's happened in my 2-year stint in the role that I play at the moment.
Thank you, Lana. Dave, I'll come to you after Jen. Jen? You're on mute. You're still on mute, hang on.
I'll go after Dave.
Are you? Dave, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just trying to say that the on that subject there, the police once they've gone back to the person who actually reported it, they came with the attitude to make the arrest because they knew what there were 6 officers that came to find out that there was someone on the roof nicking lead. If those officers came to catch somebody nicking lead, it would have been that person would have gone on the run. They would have been getting ready to chase after somebody. They came, walked past the van that said roofer, roofer, to go and confront him. Still didn't understand that he was there doing a job. So I don't see, there was no way. And when you say about training officers, right, it's fine saying you train the police, but what happens is that you're training police, but a racist person is going to be a police officer. So he needs, this police officer, this person needs training. It ends up that you've just trained a racist person to be a racist police officer. That, in that way of thinking. He's got that way of thinking anyhow. You just trained him to do the job with that attitude.
Okay, I understand. I think what Dave's saying is, or asking the question or a comment, within the training, and I think that's in anything, in any business really, Dave, to be honest.
I think it's related to unconscious bias.
If someone already has, and I don't know if it is unconscious bias, because if somebody has those beliefs and is aware of who they are, I don't think it's unconscious bias. I just think that they're already in the system. They're already in that system, and they're going to get training. But Jen had a point wanted to raise. Or
yeah, it was just in relation to what Sergeant Lana said earlier about, and it kind of relates to Anthony's comment about institutional racism. So a while back, I was working in a school, working for to support a refugee family, and the boy was being bullied, and the bullying got worse and worse and worse, and it was related to his ethnic origin. So it was related, he wasn't black, he was a refugee. And right at the beginning, before it happened, there was an organisation that I was part of called City of Sanctuary, and we were planning to go in with refugees and asylum seekers to explain in a school assembly exactly what a refugee is, what an asylum seeker is, and why they are in Preston, or yeah, it was Preston. But during that time, there was more and more bullying. The child was suffered more and more bullying, and the bullying got worse and worse and worse. But the school didn't choose to educate the staff and the pupils about refugees and asylum seekers. Instead, and I think I and my colleague thought it was the wrong decision that they made, they instead brought the police in to deal with a couple of culprits. But the boy, the refugee boy, couldn't put his finger on one or two culprits who were bullying him. And so I understand that it was a systematic, because the school was not dealing with the problem of racism, it was getting worse and worse. And instead, the police wanted to deal with one or two culprits who they thought were fanatical, or they belonged to far-right BNP groups, or their parents did. So I don't think it's the police's responsibility to deal with racism. I think it's people like in this group to help people to understand racism. I don't think, unless like you've experienced racism, you should be the person to try and educate somebody about racism.
I think it's a bit more complicated.
Yes.
I think,
did you want to come on that, and then Suli?
No, let Suli go first.
Yeah, I just feel, Jen, it's more complex than that, because let's say schools has a reputation not dealing properly with bullying. It's been a research about parents saying schools in general, they don't address bullying. Doesn't matter who is the victim, but obviously there is an aggravation on. It's more likely a black student to be picked on, but this is quite a more complex issue, because what I think everything links to the construct of society, and then how we grow up, and what role models you've been seeing, what we heard, how many you had some really, really important points about representation, because what people want is not quotas. It's not like to be putting a black person in a role because it's a black person. No, it's just to have the same opportunities. This has been discussed about the discrimination recruitment we discussed last week, a few weeks ago. It's just about equality of opportunities, as well as equality of representation. And you go to the museum with the children in the schools, and you don't see any black role model in the museums, but there is history. It's not like there isn't. There is history, and then the structural racism is that it silences, and then it makes invisible a group, very important collaborators So we have the V-Day. There was a lot of criticism about, you know, how many Black army officers were contributing, were on the front line and fighting on the wars, but these elements of the history of the contribution of these individuals are not portrayed.
I hear you, and again, I think it's about either it's not thought of, they're not included, and I think also society, Black, the BAME society, I don't think that it's like they just put up with it, you know, when they had and that's when people then say, oh, I didn't know there was Black people in World War II or World War I or etc. etc. Because if they're not doing it for us, yeah,
it's because everything associated to what comes from a white person, even children struggle with their own identity because they don't want to be Black. Some Black parents say, you know, my child really do not accept herself or himself. They want to be, and then the children say, I want to be white. I would like to be blonde. I would like to have blue eyes, because this is what is portrayed on the media, on the films. We hardly see, we have here and then an actor. So there isn't much role models in the same level as you have in white and other. And there are other elements of discrimination. It's about social class as well.
Well, again, I think I agree with you, and you just highlighted it. I don't know how many people are as old as I am, but I remember when I was growing up. So TV, what we was getting from the television was, I think, more a diverse culture. Although the images displayed, it was, you know, like they were slaves, they were like the helper, they were the cleaner, but there was more, I think, on TV. There was more. Then all of a sudden, 20, 30 years or 40 years, there's hardly any, unless you go to a movie, you know what I mean, whether they're the bad guy, you know what I mean. So they had images of people depicted in particular ways, yeah? When I went to live in London, my eyes were blown wide open, because I'm thinking, oh my God, there's people like me in a supermarket working behind the counter. There's solicitors, there's teachers, there was all kinds of people that represented me. So it made me see that not only could I be whatever I chose to be, because I remember someone saying, you're going to write a book, and I'm going, never going to happen. There's no Black writers in the 20th century. You know what I mean? But and I think it still needs to be done more across the board, but I don't think it should be a right. I just think it needs to be done. Do you know what I mean?
Glenda, can I just come back about what Jen said and about the school situation? I think you're absolutely right, Jen, that it was the school that didn't put in place the systems and the processes to deal with that situation. It's not the police to come in and try and arrest their way to solve that problem. And you're right again that it's this talking to each other that begins to repair what's been going on for generations. And this is more powerful than anything, any sort of plan or law that they could bring in. The law will help, but this will start to change people's minds, people's hearts, who will then vote in people who will change the law, and then things will be different. Now, I mentioned that the papal bull, Dum Diffusas. Now, Dum Diffusas is Latin, and it means until different. So, the papal bull that was written by Pope Nicholas V in 1492 is no different. It's still in force. the American courts still use those 3 Latin documents as their doctrines of discovery. It still recognizes slavery because many societies around the world still practice that institution in terms of, economically holding people in bondage because of debts and all the rest of it. So all that will carry on, I think, until different, which is what it said in the first place. So also within the education and culture, I heard the Archbishop of Canterbury on the radio last week talking about the statues that they're going to have to review within the Church of England at Westminster and at Canterbury. Some of them were slave traders. So how is it that even the church is holding up people as repugnant as slave traders, as people that should be respected and regarded? The people of Bristol pulled down that slave trader, and that started this issue about statues. So in terms of history, many British people do not know their history. They see these statues, they see these great, see them as great people. They don't know what heinous crimes these people committed, worse than Adolf Hitler, and we wouldn't have a statue of Adolf Hitler up. So that's the enormity of the task that has to be done to change society before we'll start getting schools acting and behaving the way they should. We start getting the police looking at the outcomes and changing. It's a whole societal change that needs to happen.
Anthony, the Oxford as well, Anthony. The Oxford College, they want to remove Cecil Rhodes' statue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been removed.
Yeah, Rhodes was full.
They've been told by a number of benefactors and they donate to the college. They said they will remove the donations. So one of the alumnus of the Oxford University, who is one of the top guys in this company, I forgot the name now, I think it's Tech something, and it's quite wealthy, said he will compensate all these racist donators that will refuse to stop donating to the college. So it was quite interesting. I found out this week about
it. Is, and the Black Lives Matter campaign has influenced people high and low. So it's great to hear that. I wondered why I'd heard that they were going to look to remove it. So you're giving the answer that money was involved, so that usually helps people to
help. I think and then that is one of the ways. Is like if you have if society pressure either via these popular movements and then the wider community, the social, and having support from the police force and the universities, and then all these influential, let's say, businesses and celebrities as well come forward and support the idea, will be a lot of more pressure, and then these will no longer be just something that we've been discussing for centuries that is going on and then not effective. There are some improvements in some sectors, I would say, but it's a long way to have this addressed properly. Really, it needs to be redressed.
One of the things we should take note of is the age of the people that's demonstrating. They're young people, and every organization, every business, if they want to have a future, then they have to take account of what the youth are saying, because they're going to be adults one day. And so I think a lot of it, is about people looking at the bottom line and thinking, if we don't start to make a shift, we're going to be like the dinosaurs. We'll just, become extinct, because those young people will get older and you know, nobody wanted to touch us because we didn't, you know, people will ask, you know, what did you do? What did you say? And their business will just, nobody want to touch them. So I think that's a big part of it, you know, the economic side, because of the young people around the world, you know, taking this approach. It won't be forgotten.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Suli. Before Glenroy, Martin, and welcome, Martin. Briefly, before you ask your question, would you like to introduce yourself again? Sorry, and welcome again. I'm glad.
Thank you. Thank you, and apologies for my lateness. I'm a councillor here in London. I'm Martin Seaton. I'm now an avid fan of the people of Preston. I wish we had such dynamic conversation here in London. So well done you. And I have to say, I've been sitting in my chair at home, attending Zoom meetings all day, but I don't mind going on to 11 or 12 o'clock tonight with yourselves. It is so stimulating. Well done, thank you. And thank you for allowing me to be, to enjoy with you tonight, okay? Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. I did want to make a few very quick points, and it's an interesting observation. So, I don't know if you can guess how old I am, but I've been in public life for just under 40 years. Okay. And I started off in public life as a school governor because my children were very young, and the local schools in those days were incredibly poor. The local secondary school was producing 5 A-Cs, 9%. The first year I joined the Board of Governors, it had 1,000 unique exclusion events at the school. Okay. It was the pits, absolutely the pits. But of course, it would have been easy for me to move away from the area or take my children into private tuition. But my wife and I decided that would not happen, that in fact would be part of that change that was necessary in the area and beyond. But the lesson I've learned from being a school governor, and I think it is analogous to the police, I think also, that many of the problems are actually, I know the word institutional is being used, but in fact, it's a leadership problem. It's actually the leaders who are the problem, okay? Those who are very well educated, highly trained, very well aware, and they're well aware that the lower ranks are behaving in absolutely disreputable manner and actually either forging, lying, or indeed behaving in ways that are wholly unacceptable and stimulating negative responses from the communities that they serve. That's not different from how teachers were behaving going back all those years ago. Okay, in the school, and they didn't. First of all, they were not relating to their student groups. There were many teachers from outside the area, or they did ever mix with the community. Secondly, they had very low expectations of them. They had preconceptions of the children, and thirdly, they were not applying the profession, the teaching profession, which is highly regarded internationally as they're being taught how to apply their professional skills to teach these children. They blame the children's economic or social circumstances for the problems they're experiencing in school. Now, it's quite obvious to me at the time that I could walk away from it, or we had to identify solutions. The solutions were not that difficult, really. You know, I was a very young man then, I can tell you. I was actually the youngest person on the Board of Governors, and at the time, the average age was around 63. It's a church school, so they're all Anglicans, and of course, the local Anglican church didn't really have many people that looked like me anyway. Okay, so of course, from their perspective, we had to be the problem. Not until I started to ask the question, how do you see these children? And the description I've described is how they actually see them. The head teacher, therefore, reflected the Board of Governors' attitudes. Despite the fact that an incredibly talented head teacher, he has 3 degrees, 2 masters, incredible, quite remarkable person, but yet was capable of allowing the most decrepit, those downright criminal teaching practices to occur in the school without any consequences. It wasn't until I threatened to refer the school to the inspectorate and note what I've observed as a governor of the school, that they, for the very first time, actually saw that I'm a black African man. Very first time. The very first occasion in which any one of them have ever had a position where a black African man was actually talking to them in a way that suggested that it is their attitude that was the problem. You are the leaders, you're affecting how the head teacher behaves, and the head teacher in turn is not ensuring that those who work for her are accountable for their performance. Okay. And if they are challenged, and if their performance is poor, there isn't an internal system that reviews and analyses and either makes a series of recommendations that performance should improve, or indeed there are clear sanctions. In this school, at that time, there were no sanctions and there were no reviews. And those were the 2 steps that had to take place, and I know it had to take place in the police force in order for it not to be deemed to be institutionally racist. But of course, the problem still remains that at the top of British government, we have a group of civil servants who are almost exclusively white in the upper echelons, almost exclusively white. And we have, I'm a Labour councillor, so I'm allowed to say this, we have both Labour and Tory governments at the upper echelon, where it matters, particularly in the Home Office, etc., almost exclusively white, and there was no sanction for poor performance. I'll just say this last, and maybe this question for Lana, and it's very unfair because you are a sergeant, okay, so I recognise that, don't worry, I recognise it, don't worry. In your role, how often have any of your colleagues either been reprimanded and therefore have lost a position, been demoted, or has been sacked because of poor interaction with members of the public, which has then resulted in the police going through a considerable financial expense to protect the police's reputation, and I think this is even more important, as expended such time that they had to defend an officer who they recognised had behaved poorly. Otherwise, members of the public who are totally innocent in this regard, who are totally powerless when interacting with the police, but for the most part, find themselves in altercations which really should not have happened if the police applied their professional skills. How often has that happened? And I'd be interested to hear what stats for your area, Lancashire, might be as compared to what it is in London, because London is extremely low, but I'm sure in Lancashire it's somewhat higher, I hope.
Thank you, Martin. And I hope you come next week.
I'll be here.
Every week. Lorna, did you want to respond to that? And then after you, Glenroy. You're on mute. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't have those figures directly. I know of cases which obviously I can't discuss in this forum where people have got the sack or have been reprimanded for various things. In large organisations, as in community, I am proud to serve as part of Lancashire Police. Are we all good cops? No, there's a few bad cops within Lancashire and within all police forces. And we have an anti-corruption team that try to, deal with those individuals that do fall below the standards of what we expect as an officer with warranted powers. Figures I wouldn't like to say. I can certainly think of 2 or 3 that I know of over the last 5 years, just off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean to say there are cases out there that I don't know about. So I wouldn't like to give any figures at all. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Glenroy and then Julia. And if anybody has a question or has a comment, please raise or use the reaction button and I will come to you. And then we'll wound up in the next 10, 20 minutes.
You hope. I just wonder whether, building on what Solly's saying about the roads must go issue, whether, you know, it might be a good idea to have a discussion around that, because I note that there are some people who are saying, for example, how necessary it is to keep these things for historical reference, etc., etc. So I saw an interesting cartoon a few days ago that shows Moses coming back from the mountain with the 10 Commandments. And as people who know anything about the Bible will know, the children of Israel, while he was away, built wooden, golden idols that they were worshipping when Moses got back. And of course, Moses started to smash them down, you know. And the caption is, Moses, don't do that. These are historic monuments. Because the reality was that they had created this thing because of the situation they had experienced in Egypt. That was the custom there, so they were reverting to that. Was that really a necessary thing? Did anybody say we had to have a statue of Hitler to remember the atrocities? You know, so I really would like, if you can arrange it, a discussion around those people who actually believe they can put an argument to keeping these statues. I mean, I don't think it should be a debate of whether roads must go. It should have been gone a long time ago. And for people to now try and use money for blackmailing when part of the crime he has committed is the theft of so much of the wealth on the continent of Africa. You know, rather than him or people relating to him threatening financial sanction, people should be going after them for their crimes and what they've stolen, to take that back for the development of places on the continent. But I really think a discussion around why anyone would think, having proven the criminal activity of A, B, or C, why we should have any monuments around them. So I just throw that out there, Glenda, as a possible subject for some later date. Thanks.
Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you. Julia. To unmute. Oh, you've unmuted.
Thank you, Glenda.
You have to speak up. Sorry, for some reason I can't hear you so much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you might have to shout.
Okay, sorry about that. I've got a couple of questions actually, and to pick up what Anthony said. I listened to that report as well, Anthony, and it made me, I thought I misunderstood what the Archbishop of Canterbury had to actually say. And he said, in the recent events of Black Lives Matter, Jesus should be reconsidered as being black because of what's been going on with Black Lives Matter. Well, that just goes to show somebody of his standing, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I've got to say it the way I want to say it, which is this. He is in a position and supposed to be an educated man. Now, I've traveled quite extensively, and all over the world, Jesus is depicted a man of color. Yes, he is not white. So there is the game changer that needs to be addressed. In every church in the UK, Jesus, the statue, is white in complexion. So perhaps if they did go back to the history books and readdress that notion, they would actually see that Jesus was black. So that's the first point. Now, my second one is to Lana, and I think you've answered brilliantly in the responses that you've given so far, but what's your feelings about, can you answer this question, what percentage of calls are actually responded to by the police? Because where I'm from, the police and crime commissioner has increased its funding to 4.5% of the actual poll tax for our area. So increased funds year on, year out is going to police and crime commissioner. And I will say on that one, the crime commissioner here got done for, should we say, illicit behaviour. So that's what I'd say there. Going on from that, if you can answer that question, what actually is the percentage of calls answered by the police is actually police work related?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
And I'll come back. Thank you, Lana.
Yeah. I can't tell. It's something I can take away and come back to you with an answer. What I can say is that the number of calls that come into the police, a lot of it is dealt with there and then on the phone. So I think it's something ridiculous. There's a high percentage of calls where people ring up asking to speak to an officer that they're dealing with a case for an update, or various things. But our communications room, which is the office next door to mine, I can go in and get those statistics for you. So say there was 100 calls in 3 or 4 hours. You want to know what percentage of those actually gets a uniform police response. Is that the question that you're asking?
Yes. Well, let me try and give you an example here. What I've got is only 2% of the actual influx of calls that go into the police are actually responded by police in uniform. So let's give you an example. If it's a gun-related call incident, police will go out and respond. If it's an aggravated call, police will go out and respond. If it's something relating to, I need a question or whatever, that's bounced off to wherever else. So I'm saying, if the authorities, the police, was defunded in their monetary amounts that they actually get, I wonder if the police would actually sit up and do a proper day's work and represent people proportionately and effectively, because how many crimes that are reported is not actioned? Because I've got an idea.
I don't know where that one goes. The only thing that for me was defunding police, because I'm hearing a lot about that at the moment.
Yeah, the funding of the police. I know the Police and Crime Commissioner asked for an increase in poll tax because I think his campaign was basically they want to see more police on the streets. We are in the process of uplift, currently trying to recruit 400 new cops for Lancashire, and I know that it has already started. In relation to the amount of calls that actually get a response, a high percentage of the calls that come into police control room get dealt with there and then. Of the calls that get deployed, they are graded from a grade 1 to a grade 4 and 5. And a grade 1 is a 999 call, life's in danger, etc., assault in progress, anything like that. We need to try and get to it within 10 minutes. A grade 2, I think, is within an hour. So there's a grading system. And then those calls are graded and deployed appropriately with the different departments that are on duty. So your 999 calls are generally responded to by your immediate response cops. Your 3s and your 4s, you might get a neighbourhood response or a PCSO. So there's different grading, different levels of calls. And we also have an appointment system too. But in relation to the percentage, I can certainly go away and get those statistics, no problem for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lana. Lana, can you just clarify, how many grades are there on the calls? 5?
I think it's 5 grades, yeah.
And 5 is serious, isn't it? The 5?
No, number 1, grade 1 is your 999 blue light job. Let's get there's like a burglary in progress, an assault in progress.
Life-threatening.
Yeah, life-threatening, a domestic violence,
Knife crime is in that as well?
Yeah, so
aggravated assault.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And who was next? Someone else had their hand up.
Can I just mention, Glenroy asked a question earlier about the churches and LGBT. Yeah, did you ask that question, Glenroy?
No, just the churches. I understand during the legislative process that the church was seeking an exemption around issues like, for example, that there were no women priests and those kind of things they were looking for. I'm not sure if they received it. That's really what I'm asking. Are there exemptions for the church in any other forms?
There are some exemptions for second faith, and obviously, if it is demonstrated that is necessary and then is not unlawful or discriminatory against other protected characteristics, and they can take into account. But I don't know exactly examples on that one. What I know is the faith, for example, demanded for the schools in Birmingham to not include in the curriculum the LGBT awareness, and then that went to court, and obviously they've been defeated. So the school is going to go ahead with the inclusion because this group of parents are from Islamic faith. And do you know that historical about the situation in Birmingham, Lana?
No.
That a group of Muslim Orthodox went to the outside of the schools, and then they started doing picketings and protesting, and then so the judge decided to remove this group because it was causing a lot of distress for the students. They were bullying the teachers. So cases like that will not be accepted, and then it's not justified because it goes against the primordial element of the Equality Act to respect and to promote good relationship in the two protected characteristics, the religious one and then the sexual orientation. So it's not going to be tolerated.
Thank you.
But I don't know exactly, but I can go in and then try to find out and then share here about what sort of exceptions to the law. I think they're still in process of reviewing and updating some elements of these exceptions. But in relation to faith, I need to go in and come back on that one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Fiona. Before you go, didn't get to speak to you tonight. How are you? Before you go, I know you came in late.
Tired and being good to listen.
How have you been? What do you think of tonight before you go?
Yeah, really useful, especially the very first talk from the Cumbria woman setting, talking about the amount of us who are beginning to listen and think and notice. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
And I've been invited to about 3 different Black Lives Matter reading, white people doing Black Lives Matter readings and that sort of thing. There's a lot going on.
Oh, brilliant. Listen, we have to link up by phone. Yeah, I hope we'll link.
We'll do that because I'd like to talk about something.
Can I ask a question, Fiona? Because I don't know, I have the impression in a few occasions talking about Black lives or racist issues with white people groups, I feel like there is some really tension in the air. Is it something you face when in your own groups? There is a lot of tension. There is people's faith is changed and the way it become kind of a uncomfortable atmosphere. Do you find that in your experience?
I live in a Remain anti-racist bubble, thank God. So I've seen a lot of tweets where, if anybody ever puts Black Lives Matter on Twitter, somebody else will always reply with White Lives Matter, won't they? And it's just shit. But that's not the white world that I live in, thank God. So
fabulous.
Depends where you are.
Yeah. I think you're okay now, aren't you? I think anyway. Because I don't know if anybody knows, but Fiona is Jen's mum.
Niece, aunt. Yeah.
And I think that's amazing, because I'm always saying to people, it's interesting now, because I'm getting even reporters, you know, I'm getting phone calls from reporters, you know, and say my daughter or my son or my child wants to go to a Black Lives Matter meeting, protest, and they want to go with their children, you know, they're grown up, so they're connecting, they're speaking to each other. Do you get what I mean? So I am seeing that side.
That's entirely how I've come, because my daughter Anna, who came 3 weeks ago, wanted to come and find out more after she'd seen the Blackout Tuesday thing, and she spent the whole day reading and writing stuff about it, and for her MVQ in team leadership, and she's written a 7-page essay about institutional racism as part of her MVQ, and totally new for her, and she brought me along to that. I've followed her.
Yeah, but it's good, and again, you know, like I said, I look forward to meeting you every week, and I'm sorry you didn't get an email, but you're welcome anytime. You've got my number. If you haven't got my number, get my number, call me anytime. Yeah. Jen was smiling then when Suli was asking the question to you. Is there anything you want to say? Because I know you say you've got to go.
No, just what I've said already, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. And
there are a lot of us about that want to be strong allies.
You're welcome. Well, share this forum. Share this forum.
And do you want more white people here?
Brilliant. Thank you.
Do you want more white people here? Because I have had some.
Of course. I think. What do you guys think?
The more the merrier.
Yes.
The more the merrier.
We are not a division. We are unity, aren't we?
Yeah, I always say that. It's about.
It's do you want more of us here? We're all the same. Don't worry. Do you want more of us?
They're all the same but different.
All same but different. That reminds me of Cecil. All same but different.
All same but different. I miss Cecil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Again, we're coming to the end. Again, I think it's going to be another part 2, 3, 4. It's been a real pleasure.
Bradley, the roofer, just so I can narrow down research, when was it reported? When did that job?
The roofer case.
Oh, sorry. Say that again, Lana.
You know Bradley, the roofer, the job that had taken up.
It was yesterday, 5 o'clock. As far as I know, the recording is from 5 o'clock yesterday. I don't know where it was. And they had to, as a matter of fact, they had to get
was in Preston, Glenda.
They had to get the person who booked the job with Bradley to clarify that Bradley was on the roof doing a job.
Apparently, what is it? Lead doesn't sell for anything anyway nowadays. No one buys lead.
Again, I think, do you know what? I think most of us were all shocked at. I got a message late last night saying, have you seen Bradley's page? Because he's part of Black Lives Matter as well. So I looked on the page, I see this video, and he's on the roof, and I don't know why, but his wife's there, partner, who's white.
You know where this building was?
In Preston, I don't know.
In Preston.
It's in Preston, but if you go on our page, on Black Lives Matter page, it's on there.
Right.
Yeah. But again, I think
I'll have a look.
One of the things was Bradley is part of the community.
I'm just correcting Emma's point, you know, so I can just dissect it. From the details that I've been told tonight, just for the purpose of everybody else, if I got sent to that job, I would have spoken to Bradley. I wouldn't have just walked past the roofer car and seen that and said, okay. I would have gone through and spoken to whoever it was I saw, regardless of what colour they were or where they were, because you can't assume.
They did, and I have to say, Lana, they did speak to Bradley. And I think, and to be
Just
honest,
tell him to come down.
yeah,
Come down.
yeah. But what I'm saying to you is, I just think that it just shows that.
Oh, right, I can recognise one of the
officers.
Yeah, oh, they've all got beards these days.
Yeah. So anyway, on that note, we're going to go around the room as we always do. Martin, I think it was said in the chat, if you can leave your contact details.
Oh, okay.
In the chat.
Okay. I can.
Is there anybody in the chat? Dave wants to say some 1 second. Is there anybody else who's got any questions they'd like to ask before we go around the room and say good night? And Sam, is Sam still here? Yes, he's very quiet. Tells us a great joke to wish us on our merry way. And before Sam, Anthony would like to close. I think it's been brilliant again. Again, it was just about raising some issues and about talking about race, about hate, about the Windrush, the Black Lives Matter, the connection with Windrush. I think I've covered everything. So if everybody would like, and when I get to you, if you just want to say what you got from this evening, and if you can keep it as short as possible. And again, thank you. And please share with your friends and family and your network. Suli.
Me? Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't prepared. I found very, very interesting to link everything with the identities, because, you know, I know it's the way, it's the law, and usually people do is to put people in boxes and label them. Is easier to categorize people, but we are a multitude of identities. We are not only represented by one characteristic, and we have several, and then it's not only linked to the 9 protected characteristics of the Equality Act. It does help to have these kind of elements in there, but in reality, I was talking to you this afternoon about I'm very impressed with the single history, the danger of a single history, the dangers of a single story, because we tend to listen one thing about a country or a person and make the assumption, and then because it's not that a single story is not true, it's because it is incomplete. You say, oh, Sueli is from Brazil. Oh, Brazil is all these naked women and dancing. They all do the carnival. So this, you know, this is the single story about Brazil. Oh, you have like this woman, naked woman. Hey.
No. The good football team.
In the samba, you know. Yeah. So it's true. It is true. You're right. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, think about England. So what does it bring you? What is the identity of England? So is it football or what is it? What is it, Lana?
So it is football.
Irish.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Poms.
You've left it on a light note, Suli. I love that you put it on a light note.
No, it's just like
it's all relevant, isn't it?
It's all relevant. If you, I'm saying that because I'm watching. I don't know if you've seen on Channel 4 the school who tried to. I sent you the link, didn't I? Yes. Glenda, if you can put in the page, both pages. You have so many pages, don't you? I've been watching 2 episodes, and then they're talking about, you know, teaching the kids in this school in London about white privilege, and then they start to embed discourse about race, and then they did what Jane, she did, what her name?
Jane Elliott.
Jane Elliott, about the blue eyes, black and brown eyes. So she is very powerful. And it was like 60 years ago. She's done that. Is it about?
Is that what you're watching?
No, we were. Jane Elliott is like old, very old experiments.
Yeah, but is that what you're watching on Channel 4, Jane Elliott?
Don't know what I'm watching. Channel 4. I think it's been weekly now, and then it's been 2 episodes, but you can catch up. It is about the school who tried to end racism.
Okay. Yes.
And they started doing these conversations with the students, and then they took them to the National Gallery, and then this is where the kids were. And then one of the things most remarkable, and I think was mentioned, Anthony already mentioned that the slavery. They start the session in the museum talking about the slavery owners. They were paid. The compensation went. Because we're talking about the compensation on the Windrush, and the compensation for his slave wasn't for his slavery, it was for the slavery owners. And then the state paid the slave owners, and then they only finished this payment in 2015. And then it's like 1500 something. You're talking about 1800. The slavery trade started 1500.
That's another debate. Yes.
Then slavery trade started 1503 or something like that, and then it culminated and carried on for 300 years. And 1800, then there is abolitionists start, and then she start talking about the kids were like really shocked, because nobody talk about these things, nobody teach the history. And then because the colonizers are always painted as heroes. I learned about the colony in Brazil. The indigenous, they are killing the indigenous. They are making them Christians, the pagans, and then they're doing all the extermination, genocide.
Yeah, and
I was
debate.
Exactly. And then I was taught in history, in my history class at school, and even at college level, they still talking nice about these stories. And then, Pedro Álvares Cabral discovered Brazil. Discovered. We weren't hidden. So,
Thank you so much. Thank you. I could. You love these, don't you, Suli? You can tell, can't you?
You know, we have more things in Brazil than naked woman. You know.
Marie, can I bring you on, darling? You're right.
Yeah.
You're right, sweet. How'd you find tonight? There's a lot of information.
Yes, I've just taken it all in. Very informative, and I like history, so I like the historical content. Some of it I'm aware of, but was it the Don de Sass that Anthony talked about, or
yeah,
Don de Sass? Huh?
Neither was I the other day. That was enlightening.
Yeah, that was that's helpful. So, just to put things in context, because context is important. It's a bit like Suli said, it's about dangerous single story, but context is always important. Even like that case with the roofer, what's the context? And it's important to explore those contexts to find out a bit more about it. And there's so many different levels of meanings that we all attribute to different things, isn't there, all the time? Anyway, very enlightening, and I'll see you again next week.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm not gonna, I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Julia, my darling.
Yeah. Again, another thought-provoking week. I think it's been a very informative evening. I think I've got one or two questions that, I wish this thing could go on for a lot longer, these discussions, because, I'm very mindful what you said to Fiona, are you okay? And I think more people need to get involved on streams like this, because it's not about saying who's wrong or right. It's about looking at the problems, what's being faced today, and that has been allowed to continue for the longest time without anybody actually deciphering and putting things right. And I think if we continue this draconian attitude of white privileges or white supremacy, then I don't think we're going to resolve this situation anytime soon. And the only way that we can do this is through education and being accepting of one another, whether we are straight, gay, bi, transgender, whatever. And I think until we start looking at people as being the human race instead of categorizing people, that's the only time I will use stereotyping. If we stop pigeonholing people, then we might just have a chance of living in peace with one another. Because somebody said earlier on at the beginning of the evening, racism is taught because we're not brought up that way. And I would advocate that that is true. However, if we are involved through our work, our social areas that we go to, or how we interact, I think if we keep it singular, then we have problems. By engagement and embracing of one another, that is how we can address some grave issues without feeling that we are doing something wrong. The very fact that if a group of Black people get together, they're too loud, they're too vocal, they're too this, they're too that. And they need to stop that, because Italians are animated. They wave their hands all over the place. Indian community, Asian communities, all allow what back, you know, they're all doing things, but that doesn't mean that their culture is wrong. It just means that we need to have a better understanding of each and every one that makes the world a better place to live in. If we can break down the racism, if we can break down the discrimination, if we start treating people with respect and not tolerance, we've got a hope, we've got a chance.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Julia, Jen. Jen? Is she frozen? Sorry. I think she's... Jenny, you're right to share what your closing for tonight is? I think... Are you frozen, Jen?
Jennifer.
Okay.
Jen.
Can I, while we wait for Jen, Martin, really look, honestly, amazing to see you tonight.
Thank you. Is my mic on? It is on. No.
Yeah. We'll come back to Jen.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing tonight is the type and the quality, the type of debate we're having tonight. I want to see more of this type of dialogue occur in London. What I said last week, of course, is that not until we involve the majority population, if I may use the term ESWs, English, Scottish, Welsh people, in this broader dialogue about race, culture, traditions, what it means, the progress that Judy has aspired to will not come to pass. It will take considerable courage, and I say this in my political arenas, that it takes some courage. If you've been taught that your peoples have been dominant, your people's been the most forceful and therefore the most aggressive. Your people have acquired the greatest wealth. Your people have been the best, most talented musicians, artists. If your people have been told to somehow history has become beholden to you because you've dominated so many other peoples, it's difficult to, even 100 years, 200 years after that experience to reset the mind, the mindset. It will take courageous people to ask the question, and I think Shirley said it. Actually, the conquistadors committed genocide. Yeah, genocide. I think Anthony said earlier on, and from my perspective, both the English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Belgians, okay, committed genocide.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Committed genocide of the most horrific kind. It didn't affect just 6 million, even 12, or even 18 or 24. It affected more than 250 million Africans over a few hundred years. Genocide. And that blood and those memories have become genetic memories.
Yes.
Okay? And I believe it affects the attitude, and I've got to say, of the leadership here, okay, both class and money. Okay, and their view of the world is very different from Lana, who said you were in Nigeria. You lived in Nigeria for a while, so you've got a perspective. You see, I know you. You've got a perspective, but most of those people would never live in Nigeria. They've got a chance, you know. As far as they're concerned, the Nigerians are a result of colonialism. That country's very name wasn't created by the native peoples. It was created by Europeans. So even my name is a legacy of that colonial area. The Setons, which comes from the enslaved family in Devon, enormous manor house, cost many millions of pounds now. They are responsible for the death or the murder of literally hundreds of my ancestors. But I still bear the name. I still bear that memory. Okay? So for me, it is a fact. It's simply a fact of life. Others of my people manifest this through mental illness, through behavioural dysfunction, relationship difficulties. They are quick to anger because it's still there. The blood is still there, and what we haven't had is therapy. I can show you, they're my own people who require therapy, and I still do, I might add. But to even greater extent, the majority population needs therapy. Okay? Absolutely. But please, hold on. And the reason why I say that is that what I sense is abject fear. They fear that if the real history was taught about the behaviour of the British, the French, the Portuguese, Spanish, and so on, okay, and the real history and the horror of that history was actually taught, and the masses were aware, possibly there would be some national shame and a desire for reconciliation, you see. Just like what we had in South Africa, the process began, just like what started to happen with the Jews, you know, and the Germans, you know. The fact we've not gone through that process of some national shame and seeking reconciliation, and the very idea that you could still pay enslaved families compensation for the enslavement of my ancestors is, wow, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? Mind-boggling. And to know that the top 100 companies in Britain right now, the foundation of their wealth is the genocide of my ancestors, is, wow, mind-boggling. But so I totally get it. I totally accept that it's so awful, and the magnitude of, if you could argue, the sin is so great that it would take time, and we're going to have to take the majority population with us, you know. And it's going to be really difficult because, of course, when I was at school, we had history. We talk about the history of African peoples. Here it is. What happened in the classroom when they talked about as slavery? And to see my ancestors, I'm a child, impressionable child, mind you, in those awful contraptions which are intended to debase them, to make them less than human, to dehumanize them, okay, was being taught to school children without any warning signs that this is about to happen and you might emotionally react. see, that's why this type of dialogue is so important. That you can begin to understand it from my perspective. You know, you can see it, Martin Seaton, look at me, and I'm Martin Seaton. That's a bit odd, isn't it? You know, it's a bit odd, isn't it? You know, I can't even speak another language. You know, that's pretty odd, isn't it? You know, that in itself is a dysfunction. It in itself is a dysfunction, and the very fact I'm you know, aware enough and recognizing the dysfunction is mentally very challenging.
Yeah.
Very challenging. So we have to make compromises and allowances every day just to cope. But I accept that many of our people intellectually can't do that, and has an emotionally damaging effect upon them. But let me pause there, because I said this is a lovely place to come for therapy, I have to say. Thank you.
I agree. And do you know, for me, I've always said it. Going on another note, before I let anybody else speak, it is very empowering to connect with you all. It's very inspiring, you know, to hear people's stories and where they come from. And as I've been on my journey, if I told you my journey, it'd take more than a night. But I remember many, many years ago when I went to my doctor, and I didn't want to live anymore, seriously, because I thought I'd lived, and I mean everything. I've done everything. And my GP, and he said, so what's the problem? I said, I don't think there's anybody like me. He said, wait. I said, and I felt really weird. And he said, so what do you want to do about it? I said, well, I believe I can get some counseling. He said, do you want some counseling? I said, yeah. So he sent me to a counselor, and the counselor said, and I remember walking into a room, and she had every single book I had. And she said, what's your problem? I said, there's nobody like me. I feel, and I felt alone. And do you know what she said to me? I'll never forget it. She said, you're unique. There is no one like you. There'll never be anyone like you. And you're allowed to be who you are. And that was a white lady. And I'll never, never forget it. And she gave me a book. And it was called A Journey Less Traveled. And that changed my life. So for me, like I said, for me, it's about knowing who you are. I get all the other stuff, but it is for me about knowing who you are. Jen, are you ready? Can you hear us, Jen? Do you want to give your recap on tonight?
No, I want to carry on listening to you. You draw me to tears.
Oh no!
Sometimes it's a good feeling though.
You're right.
Are you all right, Jen?
Yeah. Glenda's taking me somewhere.
Oh, bless you.
Oh, bless you. Bless you.
Jen.
Let Anthony go next, and Glenroy and Colleen. Yeah? Do you want me to let Glenroy and Colleen go next? Glenroy, are you there? Colleen?
He wrote a message because he said that he's
hi Glenda.
Got two computers.
I'm Colleen.
Yeah.
Oh, hi Sue and Colleen.
She's just gone to Lou, so we're not expecting to jump in on Colleen then.
Okay. Have you got any highlights for tonight?
I've only caught the back half of it, to be honest, because we didn't get back too late.
Okay.
So it's pretty late. But what we have heard has been good.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Always.
You're welcome.
As always.
You're welcome.
From me, the highlight for me.
Nice to see you all, guys, and nice to see new faces.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lana, how do you want to give your...
Yes, please. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I have found it very enlightening, inspiring, empowering. When a great bunch of people get together with the same passion I think, you know, I'm hoping that this won't end. For me, it is about the future, the education. Martin, Julia, Janett, loads of people have made some very valid points. My takeaway tonight is hopefully I could carry on working with you guys to try and improve this institutional racism that exists in every large organisation up and down the country and around the world. Even if we can make small steps now, it's steps in the right direction. So I'd be very keen to carry on this work and completely support the Windrush initiative in relation to telling the story. The history needs to be told, but for me, unfortunately, we can't rewrite what's gone in the past, and that's through, when you look at history, there's been horrible atrocities up and down the world, and still going on today. What we can do is help try and change the future. Little steps, and having meetings like this and being positive, I'm sure that we will start moving in the right direction.
I just want to testify the work I've been doing with Ashley and Lana. It just proves that if you work with really good police officers and the amount of support they've been giving to your clan students and the staff, going through incidents that we've been reporting, and you know, trying to get to the bottom of things, and then even to get the, how do you call it, the justice, the restorative justice, isn't it? Even though
positive action at the end of it.
Positive action with these potential perpetrators, but also the perpetrators are also victims because they've been taught all these wrong. And
I know we didn't get onto that subject, but I'm hoping that we're going to discuss that in the future, because it needs to be discussed about those who, and I know we talked as well. You know, it's a circle, isn't it? Those who commit those crimes, that needs to be addressed as well. But again, as it gets later, and I think Sam's going to get his wish one day. We'll be talking at 3 o'clock in the morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning.
I'll just.
Anyway,
I just want to bring on.
They are both in the South Police Force.
Yeah, I put my email on there, so feel free to.
And did you also put the link on for how people can
report? Yeah.
Right.
Put all the links and numbers. Don't do 999.
Okay, and also social media, because a lot of people has had a rise in social media.
Anything anyone's seen, like racist posts, you just print a screen by screen and report it
online.
Online. Okay, thank you. Sam, thank you.
Before the joke, I did want to say something, Glenda. Is it okay? Very quickly.
Yep.
And you know when Sueli said about the awkwardness on the faces of white people when talking about white supremacy. So I'm actually also in this book group, and I'm going to start tomorrow. And there's about 4, and I was invited by a friend of mine, Ali. He does a lot of work with interfaith. I don't know if you know Ali Amla.
No.
Christians and Muslims, and he invited me to this group, and I looked in the WhatsApp group and I saw that in this book group, White Supremacy and Me, almost everyone is white, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, wouldn't it be good if there were more people with from different cultural backgrounds in the group? And Asha, who came a few weeks ago, she said that she said she'd like to read it and like to discuss the book together. And I said, why don't you join this book group? And she looked at it and she said, Jen, I don't think it's for me because it's about white supremacy. But she's reading it and she's decided to be part of the group. So I think it'll be like add an extra dynamic. But like Sueli said, you know, will it make people feel more awkward about being honest?
Well,
because they might be frightened of offending people.
But I think because to be asked that question in a group, right? Because I know what it's like. I'm from Preston, like yourself. And for me, the majority of people is white, okay? So the only time when I saw other black people was when I went to church as a child, okay? And then white was in my street and when I went to school. The majority of my friends were white, and they've always been white. The majority of my black friends have been family, very close friends, or they went to church. And very early on, there was sort of a rule. Well, I'm not going to go out with one of them guys because they could be my brother. You get what I mean? So I had this man. So that's the way we came. But what I'm trying to say is, then when I moved from Preston and went to London, I was like, I couldn't believe it. From even, I remember the first time I saw a gay person and they were black, and I couldn't believe it because I thought, that doesn't happen in Preston. And that was in London. I'll never forget it in Soho.
Why is that so?
No, seriously, because it's not, listen, I'm just sharing.
I bet. Yeah. Right.
Listen, and back then I was in my 20s, yeah. And don't forget, I remember looking at Big Ben and looking at and thinking, oh my God, it's only tiny. It's not. It's a tiny thing. It's not a big, huge thing that I see on the news at 10. So I learned very early on that things are not what they seem to be, right? And I'm going to hit on this note, and then I'm going to let Anthony and Sam go. I learned a lesson with Black Lives Matter group this week.
Pauline didn't speak, or Glenda?
Say that again.
Pauline didn't speak.
Oh, she was going to the, she was, I will ask her if she's there. But my lesson for this week was, and I think it's something that we were shared, and I'm sure you all know it, which was, do not judge a book by its cover. And we've got a group called Black Lives Matter Preston. It's a community group. It's community led, black, white, Asian, you name it. Everybody's welcome in the group. We also got told by people of color that the group was fake.
Fake.
And I think that's because some people may wanted the group to go in a different direction. But what I'm trying to say to you is, because everybody keeps going on about education and we all need to educate ourselves and learn and grow, etc., etc. But I learned something this week, which was, do not judge a book by its cover. Someone posted, because all the posts have to be approved by the admin, and someone put a post in there. And as soon as I saw the post, it was a video, but you know, like the video is a picture. It was two white guys with beards. I looked at it, I thought, oh. Well, I went, oh, maybe they're going to talk about racism and they don't like black people. And so I had all these things going on in my head. But something said, I can't disprove it or delete. I have to watch it. So I click play. And I'm listening. It's a song. Song's playing. And I'm thinking, even at the beginning, I was thinking, God, why would this person want to post this song? So I've got all these things going through my mind. Till they started talking. And they were talking about a hospital, working in a hospital. People come from Portugal, Brazil, all over the country. The song was brilliant, right? But what I'm trying to say to you is, it made me question me judging the person who posted, the people who were singing, right? So I had already made assumptions and judgments about someone I didn't know. Do you get what I'm saying? So it happens, what I'm trying to say is to acknowledge, take responsibility for my own self.
This one, your unconscious bias.
So what I'm saying is I honor that in myself. I don't, and that's why what I'm saying to you about your aunt. I feel it for others. Do you know what I mean? Because, and when someone, and I think Lana said it, you know, I'm ashamed. I want to say, you shouldn't feel ashamed, but what's the word? Welcome that in yourself, that you acknowledge that. That's what I'm trying to say. And that heals you. That for me, heals. It heals you, it heals others. And then I'm going, and then, because I could talk all night, but what I'm saying is that's what I learned. It's about transcending the injustices that's being done. We can't change people, but we can allow them to be, and hopefully, as we grow and change, they too grow and change, if that makes sense. And Sam, I'm going to bring you in.
Well,
Anthony, you still there?
I'm still here.
I love this meeting that I'm there early. Yesterday, I thought today was yesterday, and today was not yesterday, but yesterday was today. I was so eager and keen. Anyway, I love listening to your expert. And
you're an expert too.
Yeah, listen, I'm a good listener.
Don't forget your fried dumpling and your fritters for this Friday.
No problem. All prepared.
All prepared. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support and everything.
Okay.
Anthony?
Yes, well, again, it's been great sharing this evening, and I too have got a lot out of it, but I just want to give you my thoughts for the future on a few things. Now, you know, when we talk about slavery, there's a lot of people, commentators, politicians that I've heard who say that at the time slavery was legal, and I'm talking about, you know, people in Britain. I've heard say that, but I then wondered to myself, well, when has murder and rape ever been legal?
True.
Because that was what was going on. And also, people, when they talk about William Wilberforce piloting the legislation through Parliament to end slavery, they don't look at what was going on in Britain before that, the years leading up to that with the abolitionists. And the more the slaves fought and rebelled, and the horrors of what was going on, the news of it came back to the UK.
Yeah,
people rose up and said, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
Because ordinary people hearing that said this was wrong. Yeah. So it was never accepted. And there's this famous case called the Somerset case, where Lord Mansfield, who was the chief judge at the time, was trying a case where this man was from the American colonies, and he said he owned this boy and wanted to take him out of England back to America to be a slave. And Lord Mansfield said that England's air is too pure for such an odious institution to exist in England, and made it illegal for their man to take him back to America. So with the law, it was never recognised in England.
Wow.
And it brings me to what I want to see today. I mean, somebody mentioned earlier that the slaves didn't get compensation, but the slave masters got compensated for the loss of their property, and that since 1833, 1834, when the Emancipation Act came into effect, paid, you know, £20 billion in today's money, and that only got finished paying off in 2015. So that meant the Windrush generation in their taxes were paying for
Wow.
the slave masters' compensation money, and now they are looking for compensation and they can't get their compensation today even.
Or they get a war, or they get, or like someone.
So this comes to an issue now where I think, the government says that it's sorry for the wrongs done to the Windrush generations, but I've only ever heard them saying sorry to other MPs in Parliament or television. I've never seen them call a meeting of people who have been done wrong or harmed and stand before them and apologise. That's what you do when you want to apologise to somebody. You don't sit in television or sit in your office and just say to the screen or say to MPs that nothing has been done to the MPs and that you're sorry. You go to the people who you've wronged. So I'd like to see that formal apology take place, and then that can then begin the process of reparations. And I say process because it is a process, because it's about repairing the damage, repairing the harm. You know, some of these harms still exist today, and we've talked about the disparities. That's only a small part of it. And what we're doing today is part of reparations, because you have to understand what's happened. You have to know about the history before you as a public or the British public will then put their hands up and say, yeah, we all think reparations have to be paid. And that's then about a monetary sum that then looks at the, putting people back in the position that they would have been in had this crime not taking place. And that's a long-term process. So that's something I'd like to see for the future. On the Archbishop of Canterbury, Julia, when I was hearing him talk about these statues that he's got to review, my hope for him is that he'll actually one day spend some time reading his Bible. And he'll have a look at and he'll have a look at Exodus 20 verse 4, which says, thou shalt not make unto thyself any graven images. So if he'd read that, you wouldn't be there talking about which slave master statue should come down, in Westminster or Canterbury. And then with regards to Black Lives Matter, I think there has the thing there that I think is emblematic as to the way I think I'm hoping society will go in terms of recognizing and what's happened is, when I was growing up, we used to have movies, and if a black man got a part in the movie, and you'd know that he was going to die within the first 10 minutes. So if it's a horror movie, he's the first one the monster's going to kill. If it's a space alien movie,
and we accept that. It's strange. We accept it.
There's no spoiler. He's the first one that's going to get it.
Oh my God.
And so that told you, as a child growing up, that a black life was always dispensable. You'd always.
I never thought that.
But then becoming an adult, you then get Will Smith, who's the hero of these movies. So that's the leap it took, for the in those years.
Actually, Anthony, Morgan Freeman.
Pardon?
Disappointed. Morgan Freeman.
Yes.
I'm quite disappointed with him because he's been like in denial about racism. He says you shouldn't talk about it because if you're talking about it, it wouldn't exist.
But that's his. But you've got to understand where he's coming from.
Yeah.
And a lot of, whether you call it conspiracy theories or fake news, you got to understand where they're coming from, and that's genre. Put it that way. I'm just going to put it that way. That's another debate. But
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman has had a lot of stick for many, many years. And again, it's another debate. Not seriously, because we could talk about that as we go into celebrities, etc., etc.
I understand where Morgan Freeman's coming from, because I touched on that in part of what I was saying. Because when I said that I first came to Wigan, I live in Wigan, and people would say to me, "You're all right, love." I'm thinking, they're calling me love. I've never been called love. But the attitude of people, you didn't think about racism. I mean, I met a girl who became my wife, and it took a year before she ever said the word black. And I'm thinking, does she know I'm black? Because she never said it. And, you know, we go out to events and things like that. Really? And so I'm saying that my life experiences amongst white people, I mean, I can count the incidents on one hand where I've ever had any issues. Most of it has been fine. I think that's what Morgan Freeman is saying, that, you know, he's worked in the movies, and his attitude of mind is, you know, what he achieves, he's worked for, and he's not allowed things to be a barrier to him, and he's engaged with people around him in such a way that, you know, the issue of racism doesn't arise because he doesn't think about things life that way. I think that's what he's talking about. And a lot of times I'm out there, like I said, you know, last meeting, when people, I was sat on the bus and people were talking about nigger and wog and all the rest of it, and I'm thinking,
dealing with it differently.
That's not my name. So
yeah,
he can't be talking to me. And that was just my attitude. But for some other people, which a white guy at the back of the bus was really annoyed about it and got up and started going to the driver and got him thrown off into the wet and cold. So it's about your experience and your view of the situation, and I think that's where Morgan Freeman is coming from. So just to end, Dumdy for Sass, I've put a link in the chat about that, until different, and I've got a new Latin phrase which I've been using, and that is fervent opus. And that's burning work, and that's the title of our conference, and that's the passion that we have in terms of tackling, you know, the disparities and dealing with the issues around Windrush. And I think until we all start this burning work, which I think many of you are now doing, having this passion to engage and to tackle racism, until we all start doing that,
Anthony, can I just interject? Can we change passion to purpose?
But you see, what I'm saying is that when you engage in it, you do have this feeling, you do have this love, because, well, that's what I feel anyway, and that's what a lot of people around me feel. And I know I can see it with Glenda all the time. It's this love that she keeps putting out in terms of the community and the people around her, and it energizes other people, and that's what I mean about that passion. And it's like a burning passion, so we call it burning work, and we feel that will make things different. So the Pope said, until different, and so we're making it different.
Thank you so much. And as I said before, I think when I had my history lesson the other day with Anthony, because I'm all about inclusion, but not on a physical level, but on a spiritual level. Because I know that when I go into the ground or wherever you want to go, that color or race or religion or orientation, whatever it is not the issue. And it's a shame that on this earth that is pulled into question. So when I had the conversation with Anthony, and I do, honestly, I keep saying it all the time, I think we all come into contact with each other for a reason. And I believe that we're all connected. But what I was saying was, wow, I had a history lesson. I think it was 3 hours when I sat with Anthony. Dom Dia, all of it, the whole, and I'm like, wow, I'm going, oh my God, blown away. And I honestly believe that if people also got that information, they'd be more wiser, they'd be more able to understand why we are the way we are, where do we come from, why we think the way we do. I appreciate every single one of you, Lana, for coming. Absolutely brilliant. I always big up Clive, because Clive, like you, is like one of us. And I think sometimes we forget that you're one of us. Do you know what I mean? And I think that the police forget they're one of us. And I think that needs to be addressed as well.
Just let me say something on the police, Glenda, because it's just come back to mind. You know, I've talked about the outcomes and the figures. Yeah, I've talked about the outcomes and the figures and so on. But the last 2 encounters I've had with the police have been really, really positive. And, you know, I can't remember any negative encounters with the police. But I was coming along the motorway. This was about a couple of years ago, and my car broke down. And his police officer came, and asked me what, and he said, "Would you like a lift?" And he gave me a lift to my house off the motorway. And I'm thinking, are they supposed to do that? They're not. But I arranged to get the car back and so on. And then another time, I got a puncture not too far from my house. And I was trying to make it home because I thought, oh, I wonder. I thought that the spare was punctures as well. So, and then the police stopped me, and he said, "Oh, you won't make it home on this. Park it up, and I'll give you a lift home." So you hear all these interactions about black people and the police, but they're to say that not all the police are like that. Some of them are quite helpful. Well.
I agree. I do agree.
And as I say, I've interviewed a lot of them in terms of the work that I was doing with the College of Policing, and I think there's lots of people in there that are the right caliber, and the training materials is great. But as an institution, they've got processes and procedures and attitudes that how it then culminates in certain behaviours by some officers, you do get these outcomes that are there in the statistics. And I think there needs to be some new measures put in place to deal with that.
I agree. I so agree, and that's why I said, and I wanted to say that throughout my life, like I saw, I don't know if you can. Oh, you can't see it, but I'm going to show you today. Which I didn't think was going to be honest, I didn't think it was a good question, but it seems that the powers that be, and I'm talking about universal, not physical. So that was in the paper today.
Wow. That's
so,
what we're doing.
You know what I mean?
It's time to talk.
And it's time to talk. And it's talking about racism, and it's talking about all of us coming together. That's the black community, that's the Asian community, that's Polish, Italian, you name it. We all have to come together and talk. And I hope that we are part of that conversation. I've learned a lot, you know what I mean? Whether I've gone to Italy, lived in London, gone to France, wherever around the world. I haven't been to America yet or the Caribbean. But what I'm saying is that we all have something to give and share with other people. And I think it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I will close on the notes before I let Sam finish, is that do not judge a book by its cover. And as I put tonight from my book, Power to Question, because I believe we all have the power to question, is about making sure, because we haven't walked in anybody else's shoes. And as a book is concerned, until you read the book, you don't know how the story ends. You don't know the story. So that was my valid point for this week. And I'm really, really glad that you all came this week. Pass on to, and thank you, Anthony, Sam, Jen, Julia, Martin. Martin, well, we have to catch up. I'm hoping you're going to be able to speak one night. And I'm Jeff Palmer is coming on as well. Suli, Lana, I know you've got to go home. It's been a long night for you. Thank you for coming and doing the safe distancing. It's been absolute pleasure. These are recorded. Jen, thank you for all your support in putting this together as well, and helping and summarizing the events as we go forward. Again, like I said, thank you very much. Sam, have you got your joke?
Yes.
I'm listening.
Right. Why did the nurse need a pen at work?
Don't know. Did the nurse
why
need a pen at work?
Why did the nurse need a pen at work?
Why did the nurse need a pen
at work?
At work.
A red pen, sorry, a red pen.
A red pen at work.
Yeah.
Why did the nurse need a red pen at work? It's Julie's face. Can I have the answer, please?
Because she needed to draw blood.
Draw blood.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Good night.
What do you call a pony with a cough?
Say that again.
What do you call a pony with a cough?
A pony?
Yeah.
Without a...
No, with a cough.
With a cough.
Nay.
What do you call a pony?
Yeah,
with a cough.
I don't know.
A horse.
A little horse.
A little horse.
One more.
Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Good night. Good night. Good night.
Wow. How do you throw a space
You have
party?
my number. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
How do you throw a space party?
Oh.
How do you throw a...
Space party.
A space party?
Yeah.
Don't know.
You plan it.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thursday, you need to mention now.
Oh yeah, Thursday we have a PR and admin team that are.
Well, this Thursday.
This Thursday, I think we readjust. We have put it to 9 o'clock because I've got a meeting. I'm on a conference call, but it's at 9 o'clock on Thursday. If you'd like to get involved, it's about helping us write letters to MPs, the administration, PR for Preston Windrush, but also it could also, if you've got a group where you are.
The Preston races, that event, I mean.
Yeah, the Light Foundation.
The Light Foundation event.
Well, the Light Foundation event is at 7 o'clock.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
And we didn't mention it, did we? Lana, because Lana, I don't know if you found it, but Lana and myself are the only two women on this.
I wouldn't know that. I didn't even know I was speaking at it.
Well, Lana, I'm glad you're on the call with me, but I was invited to speak on this, and it's called "Is Preston Racist?" Is Preston City racist?
Yeah. So it's a multi-faith forum.
However, it has
the Dimash facts.
It's thrown a lot of questions. I'm looking forward to it. There's Matthew Brown. Is our lead councillor in Preston. Nadeem, I can't remember his surname. Ask Hall, and the other person I don't know. And now I know Lana's there, and I've been asked to speak. The interesting thing for me is that, like I said in the paper today, I can't believe it. Because I didn't think it was an important question. to be honest. And I didn't think it would, the question would raise such a interesting question, if that makes sense. So that's on Thursday at 7 o'clock on Facebook Live, isn't it?
Yeah.
So everybody's welcome. Please share. It's been a great evening. Julia, I know we could talk all night. I'm going to catch up with you soon. You've got to go home, Lana.
Lana, good.
Thank you again. And I hope you can join